Faites l'appel, s'il vous plaît, Madame le greffier.
Monsieur le sénateur Gorst. Monsieur le sénateur...
Présent.
Monsieur le sénateur Farnham. Madame le sénateur Ferguson.
Présent.
Monsieur le sénateur Lefondre.
Présent.
Madame le sénateur Valois. Madame le sénateur Moore. Monsieur le sénateur Pallett. Monsieur le sénateur Mezek. Monsieur le connétable de Saint-Hélier. Madame le connétable de Saint-Laurent. Madame le connétable de Saint-Sauveur.
Présente.
Monsieur le connétable de Saint-Brelade. Monsieur le connétable de Greville. Monsieur le connétable de la Trinité. Monsieur le connétable de Saint-Pierre. Monsieur le connétable de Sainte-Marie. Monsieur le connétable de Sainte-Wanne. Madame le connétable de Saint-Martin. Monsieur le connétable de Saint-Jean.
Présent.
Monsieur le connétable de Saint-Clément. Madame le député Martin.
Présente.
Monsieur le député Southern. Madame le député de Greville.
Présente.
Monsieur le député Lewis.
Présent.
Monsieur le député Tadier. Monsieur le député Higgins.
Présent.
Monsieur le député Masson. Madame le député Pinel.
Présente.
Monsieur le député de Saint-Martin. Monsieur le député de Sainte-Wanne.
Présent.
Madame le député Dublé. Monsieur le député Labbé. Monsieur le député Wickenden. Monsieur le député de Sainte-Marie.
Présent.
Monsieur le député Truscott.
Présent.
Monsieur le député Young.
Présent.
Monsieur le député Ash.
Présent.
Monsieur le député Morel.
Présent.
Monsieur le député Guida.
Présent.
Monsieur le député de Saint-Pierre. Monsieur le député de la Trinité.
Présent.
Monsieur le député de Saint-Jean.
Présent.
Madame le député Lehegara.
Présent.
Monsieur le député Ayer.
Présent.
Madame le député Pershar.
Présent.
Monsieur le député Ward.
Présent.
Madame le député Alves. Monsieur le député Pamplin.
Présent.
Madame le député Gardner.
Présente.
Monsieur le doyen.
Notre aide soit au nom de Dieu qui a fait les cieux et la terre. Amen. Seigneur Dieu, Père éternel et tout-puissant, qui a établi le gouvernement et la puissance de la terre pour le règlement et pour la conduite du peuple, et qui nous a commandé d'avoir toujours pour but la gloire de ton saint nom. Nous te prions qu'il te plaise de donner à cette assemblée le don de conseil et de prudence, d'unir le cœur et les affections de tous ceux qui la composent. Et de les conduire tellement toi-même par ton Saint-Esprit que toute leur délibération est accompagnée de ta bénédiction. Réussissent au bien à tout soulagement du peuple, qu'il te plut de commettre leurs soins. Car nous t'en prions au nom et par les mérites de ton Fils bien-aimé Jésus-Christ, notre Seigneur, qui nous a enseigné de t'invoquer en disant: Notre Père, qui est aux cieux, ton nom soit sanctifié, ton règne vienne, ta volonté soit faite sur la terre comme au ciel. Donne-nous aujourd'hui notre pain quotidien, et nous pardonne nos offenses, comme nous pardonnons à ceux qui nous ont offensés. Et ne nous amène pas en tentation, mais délivre-nous du mal. Car à toi est le règne, la puissance et la gloire, au siècle des siècles. Amen.
Monsieur le sénateur Farnham.
Défaut.
Madame le sénateur Valois.
Malade.
Vous jurez que Madame le sénateur Valois est tellement indisposée qu'elle ne peut pas assister aux États sans exposer sa santé. Monsieur le sénateur Pallett.
Présent.
Monsieur le Sénateur Mezek,
Présent.
Monsieur le Connétable de Saint-Hélier, Monsieur le Connétable de la Trinité,
Madam, just one question. He's in Nepal on behalf of the government.
The way states business, as marked before, if members are
He's away on state's business.
Yes, we've heard that. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank
Okay,
you.
thank you.
Monsieur le Député Southern, Monsieur le Député Tadier,
Présent.
Monsieur le Député Masson.
Malade.
Vous jurez que Monsieur le Député Masson est tellement indisposé qu'il ne peut pas assister aux États sans exposer sa santé. Madame le Député Dublé, Madame le Député Dublé,
Présente.
Monsieur le Député Labbé,
Présent.
Monsieur le Député Wickenden,
So the deputy's got a hospital appointment this morning. Can he be marked excuse until he can get in? Thank you.
Members content with that? Excuse.
Monsieur le Député de Saint-Pierre,
Sir, the Deputy de Saint-Pierre, could I ask that he be marked excuse? He was here earlier, but his wife received notification of a positive COVID test, so he thought it best to go home, so he'll be joining as soon as he possibly can.
Members content the deputy be marked excuse? Yes, excuse.
Madame le Député Alves.
Malade.
Vous jurez que Madame le Député Alves est tellement indisposée qu'elle ne peut pas assister aux États sans exposer sa santé. La simplicité, non, Monsieur le Président.
Les États sont constitués. Now, members were considering the Minister's amendment to the 45th Amendment lodged by the Connétable of St Brelade, and I think we were about to receive some advice from the Attorney General in respect of questions asked towards the end of yesterday. Mr. Attorney?
Yes, sir. So, Deputy Tadier asked me for advice as to whether the Minister's amendment to paragraph 1 of policy ER4, which concerns daytime and evening economy uses, would have the effect of stopping activities in relation to restaurants or bars opening, or pubs opening in the defined centre at Les Canavets. And so my answer to that question is that the Minister's proposed amendment would restrict planning permission being granted for new bars or pubs where those new bars or pubs, where that would involve a change of use of existing land or buildings. And those uses are defined in Schedule 2 to the 2011 General Development Order. And they would also restrict the extension of any existing buildings which are currently used for bars or pubs. But if those buildings wish to be extended for further use for pubs or bars, that would also involve an application for planning permission. So the effect of this proposed amendment would be that those sorts of applications would not be supported. As regards restaurants and cafes, those are in a different use class under the 2011 order. They are in use class B, and so the Minister suggests that his amendment would not restrict the opening of those or applications for planning permission for new bars or restaurants, and I would agree with that. They are in a different use class or order, and he also suggests that he would be able to ensure the opening of cafes or restaurants later into the evening through planning conditions, and I would also agree with that suggestion. So I hope that answers the Deputy's question.
Thank you. Deputy Tallier, a further question?
Yeah, thank you. Thank the Attorney General for considering that overnight and answering. I guess the question that arises from that for me is that the orange part on the map, which is quite closely defined, that was circulated yesterday, in that case, if a new application for a change of use for a pub came in, for example, let's say, I'm not saying this would happen, but people might be familiar with the Freedom Surf Shop, which is now vacant. Let's say they wanted to convert that into a pub. That couldn't be converted into a pub under the new rules if we pass this amendment, but the pub that does exist right next door to it could convert into a sports shop selling surf equipment, and that would be allowed. So the area would be effectively left without any pubs. Is that the case? And then further question, the further question is that outside of the orange area, which isn't defined by this proposition, of course, you could presumably have a pub set up, even though that's in the residential area, and it wouldn't be appropriate. So I'm just asking if what the intention is, that I think we want to preserve the residential nature of the area. Is this really achieved by this amendment? I don't know if the Attorney General can add to that.
Attorney, are there any issues of law you want to respond to in relation to that particular question?
So in relation to the first part of the Deputy's question, he is correct in his example. So yes, it would restrict the opening of a pub in the surf school, but it wouldn't restrict the opening of a surf school in what is now a pub. As regards the second part of this question, the policy simply does not apply outside the defined centre at Lake Kennebaw. So normal planning considerations would apply. So if an existing property is proposed to be used as a pub, that would involve a change of use and would require planning permission, but that is outside the terms of this policy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Does any member wish to speak on the amendment? Yes, Conatable St Helier.
Thank you, sir. I think members are probably aware that I put an amendment to the island plan in relation to Le Kennebaw becoming the island's second town. And I described it in that amendment as driving a coach and horses through the concept of sustainability in Jersey, harmful not only to Kennebaw and St Brolads, but harmful to St Helier. I withdrew that amendment, sir, because the inspectors were not impressed by it, and nor was the minister, and I saw Deputy Tallier's amendments were in there to get a master plan and so on and get things moving. And so I find it quite ironic, really, to be listening to this debate, and I wonder what the public are thinking as they heard us last night debating whether a restaurant in Kennebaw should be able to open in the evening or not. And that is where the Bridging Island Plan has got to. And I'm beginning to think perhaps we should rename it, and we should call it the Bridging St Brolard Plan, because we seem to be spending an inordinate amount of time micromanaging how Kennebaw is going to develop under this new document. So I'm not really impressed. I feel that the members for St Brolard, and I include the planning minister in this, have actually got what they asked for. They want St Brolards, they want Kennebaw to turn into the island's second town, and I'm afraid that will bring adverse consequences to those areas. But that's what they're going to vote for. Deputy Tallier's got his master plan agreed. Well, jolly good. In 2011, I got a master plan agreed for the north of St Helier. And guess what? Just this month, work is starting on phase 1 of the North of Town master plan. That's 11 years ago. And members will also probably have seen that my amendment to introduce a tougher policy on planting our trees in the ground and providing more water in our urban areas, more water features, has been approved without comment. And it's quite, again, ironic or funny or a bit of both, that when I was preparing that amendment and I looked up the old island plan, I discovered that I had had that very amendment adopted in 2011. And it made absolutely no difference to the fact that trees have been planted in St Helier in the last 11 years in containers where they should have been planted in the ground. So that provision made no difference at all. So all I'm really saying, sir, in contribution to this amendment is I don't think much of what we're discussing is going to make any difference at all. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Conatable. Deputy Gardner.
Thank you, sir. And I'm pleased to follow my constable as a St Helier deputy. What I would like to raise, there are island-wide policies which are extremely important because we can see Ireland as a whole. At the same time, there are policies that are concentrated at certain areas. As a deputy of St Helier, and from what I know from my parishioners, I cannot see my parishioners traveling to St Brelade to have night out, maybe once a year, maybe twice a year. They will be in St Helier. It's cheaper, it's easy, it's walkable distance. So what's important for me as a state member that currently needs to vote on this amendment, an amendment on amendment, to understand what are the stakeholders in St Brelade thinking about it. And when I'm talking about the stakeholders, that's residents, business owner, hospitality that in this district, because they will be the main users. As St Helier resident, I do use once in a while La Canave during the day, and I enjoy using it, and I would like to be developed during the day if I'm in that area to use. And what's coming to my mind, we had all, and I apologize by the way in advance for all residents of Grouville that I didn't respond to their emails, but I think I received approximately 50, 60, I don't know how many emails, which clearly stated to me as a state member, we don't want housing on green fields in Grouville. It was very clear from the residents, it was representation, and it's clear how I, as a state member, will vote on it. On Saturday, and I'm grateful for the Constable of St. John, who invited us and showed the full consultation that has taken place in St. John. So I could see the whole process, engagement with the residents, businesses, and all people who connected to this area, what they think. So it was presented to me, and I have clear vision how I can support or not support this or that proposal around St. John. What I would like to ask from the deputies of St. Brelade who didn't speak yet, from the constable when he will be summing up, from the minister who is also connected to St. Brelade, would you please indicate if any consultations on these matters was taking place with stakeholders in this parish around La Canave, and if yes, what was the outcome and what they would like to see at their area. And this is important for me to understand the views of the people who will be immediately affected by this vote. Thank you, sir.
Deputy Gardner, there's a point of clarification from the Deputy of Deputy Taddeo. Would you accept that?
Yes.
Yes, Deputy Taddeo.
So does the last speaker accept and is it her understanding that that this isn't an amendment put forward by any of the St Brelade representatives? This is a last-minute amendment from the minister, I think, trying to do best of a bad job. Is that, and that does she understand that point?
I completely understand. We're currently debating an amendment of the minister to the amendment of the Constable of St Brelade regarding La Canave. So it's amendment to the Bridging Island Plan. And because there are two amendments on the same matters, I would like that anybody will indicate what, if any, consultations has been taken.
Does anyone wish to speak on this amendment to the amendment? accordingly, I call upon the Minister to reply.
Thank you, sir. I think members raise very good questions. I must admit, hearing the debate, I'm beginning to wish I perhaps hadn't put the amendments, but nonetheless, I think I need to see it through. Look, I think my approach to this was driven by the fact that we have proposed quite a big change in this island plan. We are proposing that we start to treat the area on the west of the community area in the St Bullards region, not just this particular zone, but as a secondary centre. That is a very new policy. The Constable himself said that as soon as he saw that in the draft plan, he banged in an amendment to kill it, as it were. Well, I think I'm very grateful that the Constable withdrew that, because I think what everybody agrees, I believe, is that we need to have we need to be able to refresh our policies for that area. And I think that's what the island plan draft attempted to do. And I think, it's a bridging plan. So those policies in 3 years' time can be reviewed. I think my view is, well, Deputy Gardner is right. There is going to be a master plan. We've made that commitment, and I'll deal with the question of getting it done in a minute. But that is where the consultation with residents, stakeholders and businesses and so on will take place. And that's going to have to be done throughout that area. So as we speak at the moment, no, it's like a start. But there will have to be this big process, and I expect these policies will evolve. So the question is, how far do you go in the starting, to start that off? We can either do as the Connetable of St Bullard says, let's just not do any, which leave it as it is. Or we can have a halfway house where we start to try it out and see how those policies work. We've heard the Attorney General that we've got the legal, if you approve this, there's the legal status of VARIS to make it work. Yes, current planning policies override, are still there. It doesn't stop existing buildings, it won't stop any of that. And I'm afraid in relation to the sort of the pubs in that area, then I'm afraid, that's an example where you get lots of anomalies in the planning system, and I'm afraid it's all over the island. You point to similar things. There are a couple of pubs within probably 100 yards of each other in that area. But anyway, and there's nothing in this will do anything about that or attempt to. They do carry on. Now, the other thing is, I want to try and keep it to the big picture and not go into a St Bullard's planning meeting. The Constable rightfully complains that I think it's disgraceful that past island plans have had commitments to do things, and they haven't happened. Now, if I was staying on in politics, I could tell your members now, I'd be forcing amendments to the government plan to deliver resources to make sure all these things that are labelled proposals in this plan happen in the lifetime of the plan. And I can't tell, I could list 50 things that have been said in past plans that are just dreamland, because what's happened is budgets have been cut and there's been no money and people have just had to make the best of a bad job. Now, that needs to change in our future governments as part of the, and I expect, I know the Constable of St Helier is passionate about this, and I very much, whoever is Constable of St Helier, I hope they drive this forward, because, I'm presenting these proposals in here as real proposals to really do. But I think it's members' choice. I think yesterday, one little minor issue I cleared up, the Constable sent me a note and said he's got no problems with pubs being open till late, and they can always have late extensions. And there we are. So I'm sure the Constable will speak in a minute. So the members have a choice. I maintain the amendment, sir. Thank you.
Is the appel called for?
Yes. Please.
The appel has been called for.
First, could we raise the defo on the Centre Farnham?
Members agree to raise the defo on the Centre Farnham. The defo is raised. Members are invited to return to their seats. Those joining the meeting via the Teams link are invited to cast their votes in the chat channel. And I ask the greffier to open the voting for members in the chamber. all members have had the opportunity of casting their votes, then I close the voting. And I can announce that the amendment has been rejected. 19 votes for, 19 votes against, and 2 abstentions.
Can we have the abstentions, please, sir?
The
Yes.
Conotop of St Helier and the Conotop of St One both abstained.
So we now return to the amendment. Does any member wish to speak on the amendment lodged by the Conotop of St Brelard? Yes, Deputy Ward.
Thank you, sir. We're now at a point where we have an amendment, and I could not see how either of these amendments were, again, similar to some of the words I said yesterday. I don't see why this is necessary, and I don't see why it's necessary because policy ER4 states at the end will be supported where the proposal does not have an unacceptable impact on neighbouring residents and uses. So already within the policy is a check and balance about unacceptable impact in the surrounds. But what we're now talking about is the removal entirely at the centre of the defined centre of the Kennervay from any development. And I have no idea how this will work. And I think about some of the businesses near where I live and along the front of St Helier. There were one or two who survived because in the daytime they were used for one particular thing, as a cafe, serving one particular type of food, and it was great. But in the evenings they were shared, if you like, use. And in the evening there was a different form of restaurant that worked. And that was the way they could maintain businesses there, by sharing the rent, by sharing the facility, by sharing the responsibility. And I'm concerned that what this will do is it will stop that change into the evening, and it will therefore cajole businesses into not existing because they don't have that flexibility. Plus, again, and I think there's a negativity to this nighttime economy, this negativity towards people having the freedom to go out and enjoy themselves, towards, and I'm not going to say young people because it's not young people alone who want to go out and enjoy themselves, people of all ages. And what we should be looking for our towns and our areas are models such as one of the places I love to visit when things are more normal is places like Barcelona, where you can, into all hours of the evening, there are places open and all generations are there. And it's not an aggressive atmosphere in some of those places. It's a really wonderful economy. And we have the beaches and we have the climate very frequently where we could be doing that. But what we're saying is, oh no, we won't do that. We'll close down. And we'll limit that because, and to some extent, and I may be wrong here, and I'm happy to stand corrected at the time, it's as if we don't trust our population to be able to behave in a way that is acceptable when they go out for the evening or late at night. And this is a parental state, ironically, from those who are perhaps more conservatively minded. And this is a strange argument for me to be having. But I simply don't see the benefit of this. And I want to repeat again, sir, ER4 states where the proposal does not have unacceptable impact on neighbouring residents and uses. It is already there. Why would you give planning permission to something that is going to ruin a neighbourhood with noise and pollution and mess? You wouldn't, and it needs to be organised. And there's two other points that came from yesterday. Sorry, just say again, sir. There was talk about people queuing up for the bus to get back to town late at night. The solution there is to have a bus service that works for everybody. And unless we start addressing those things at those late nights, then we're never going to have that change on the island. And in terms of, well, we can't police this, then that's an issue for policing on the island. And whether we've got the right numbers of police available at the right times. And I'm sure the police who will do a wonderful job in police will appreciate that support from this assembly to say, look, it's not about closing everything down, because all you're going to do is, as somebody else mentioned, is put those problems behind front doors privately, and you know, groups of, and that is particularly perhaps young people who have got nothing to do. So we have to be realistic. This is 2022. It's not 1952. You know, people aren't going home and, you know, the world has changed. And the only way you can do that is to allow intelligent, sensible development. And I welcome Deputy Tadia's master plan. Although the word master plan, I think, does, for many of us, think, well, yes, a master plan never really happens. But there you go. Let's hope it does this time. Perhaps with the correct government that will happen. But anyway, let's move on. But so I am concerned, and I think this has already been covered, and this is unnecessary, and it's an unnecessary straitjacket on development, which could be intelligent development and actually make a vibrant area as opposed to one that is unacceptable to many.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Tadia.
Thank you, sir. I don't disagree with a lot of the general points there that my colleague made just now. I think the devil is in the detail on this one, and I think what we just saw was a well-intentioned but very last-minute amendment from the Minister. And as Deputy Gardner pointed out, that, of course, it wasn't possible to consult on it, let alone even understand necessarily the full implications, you know, about what it meant. And I think I can answer some of the questions that she put about representation and about the views of stakeholders. Of course, we haven't necessarily consulted directly on this particular, but we couldn't on this last one. You know, for my part, I've been doing 13 years of consultation with the residents of that area, and I think all of the representatives have strong bonds with the community in St Brelard and in Lachenabay, and I don't apologise to the Constable of St Helier for making this part about Lachenabay, because it is an island plan. We are the representatives for that area, and when we finish debating this, we'll move on to other parts of the island. And of course, I sympathise with the Constable of St Helier if he's had to wait 11 years, but all I can say is that it's just as well I've put the amendment in for a master plan now if it takes 11 years, because I don't want to wait another 4 or 10 years to do that, if that's the waiting time. What I can tell Deputy Gardner is that I know what the general feeling is from the residents, and I think it goes back to the point that as things stand, it works. It is a largely residential area. It has pretty much all the amenities that it needs. It's seen some demographic and social changes over the years, sir. And I'll give an example. This was perhaps something I was thinking about during the fishing debate, sir, initially. And when I was I spent a brief time, a few months on the west coast of America, USA, in Oregon, and they had a natural park there, a coastal national park. And I was walking on the beach, and I was really surprised that all you could see on the beach, sir, was mussels and starfish. You might ask, what has this got to do with Lachenabay? And I think it shows
sometimes what the unintended consequences can be of a particular policy. So over there, they wanted to say this national park has to be preserved, and therefore you can't do any fishing, you can't take anything. And I was walking there, I've never seen mussels that big ever in my life. And I suppose the Jerseyman, the fisherman in me just wanted to go and grab a load, take them home and cook them up with some garlic and lemon and a bit of white wine. I wasn't too interested in the starfish. But clearly what happened is that this ecosystem has grown up whereby there were no other predators, so the mussels just flourished. And the only thing that ate them were the starfish. So there were loads of starfish, loads of mussels. And it makes me think a little bit like of what Lekene Bay is and Red Houses is at the moment. It's not quite that bad, incidentally. Is that it could be that you only get bookies and pharmacies, because there's no shortage of pharmacies when you come to Red Houses. It's like, you know, how many pharmacies do you need in a small area? How many bookies shops do you need in a small area? And it used to be the case, of course, that years ago you had the pub up at Lamoy, the Lamoy Inn, where the Constable of St Saviour's will probably remember it for line dancing. There's some really good music and social events that went on up there. The Mermaid was just up the road, okay, not in St Brelard, but it's all part of that offering. Now you've effectively got two pubs in the centre of Lekene Bay. You've got Miller's Bar, which is next to Freedom, which I mentioned to the Attorney General, and you've got the Horse and Hound, and they both offer a different type of offering. And I'm not going to offend anyone by saying which one is the best or which one you should steer clear of, because I think they offer a different service. But there isn't the type of restaurants where you could go in the past to Roosters and eat somewhere. If you're lucky, you can go down to On the Rails, and depending on the time of day and, you know, how they're feeling with restrictions, or if they've just been broken into, they may not be in a great place. So I think it's really delicate sometimes about how businesses and how the community thrives or just functions. And what seems to me the case here is that there are some unintended consequences. So I came into this debate wanting to support the Constable because to answer the question in a roundabout way to Deputy Gardner, is that people in the area don't want to see nightclubs springing up in Lekene Bay. They don't need that. If they want to go to a nightclub, they go to the 5 Mile Road. They'll go down to the bay, they'll go down to St Albans, they'll go to town if they want to on the very good bus service. We don't need it up the top of St Brelard in the Lekene Bay area. That doesn't mean that we're NIMBYs, it's just that you wouldn't have a nightclub in the middle of Maupont, would you? You wouldn't have a nightclub in the middle of St Peter's Village, in La Grande Pièce, or La Petite Pièce, that goes without saying. But you might have one down the road at the Water Splash. In fact, you do have one down the road at the Water Splash for occasional use. So this is all about being sensible, and I think that it comes back to the point that there are other mechanisms in place. So that I wouldn't want to get into the situation whereby the two pubs that we have in the area, and this isn't all about pubs, of course, but let's look at that for now. What if the Horse and Hound decided it wanted to close, couldn't sustain itself, or Miller's Bar, which is in the precinct right next to that Freedom Surf Shop, which is shut now? What if they said, we're closing, and someone else came along and said, okay, well, that pub's no longer available, I want to open a pub in the surf shop. Under the current planning restrictions, that wouldn't be, if we pass this amendment, that probably wouldn't be possible, even though it's a logical nonsense, because there was always a pub there. So I just think there's no point in making changes for good and well-intentioned changes that are going to have potentially perverse consequences, sir. I want to see the area flourish. I want to see more restaurants, more activity in a sustainable way. I want to see more greenery in that area, and I want to see some give and take. And I'd be welcome to hear from the Constable of St Brelard what he thinks. But as things stand, I think we don't need this amendment now, but I think we do need to keep a close eye on what permissions we give to businesses as and when they either require renewals, extensions, or changes of use, and that should be done through the proper democratic systems of the parish, the licensing assembly, and just general consultation, sir. So I'm inclined to ask members if they want to know what I think the residents of that area want. I think it's pretty much to leave it the same, but give us more resources, give us more consultation in future, so that we can be in control of what goes into our community.
Thank you, Deputy. Minister for the Environment.
Thank you, sir. Although we've gone into a very localised debate, I think some useful principles are being raised here. And I agree with most of what Deputy Sadier said. And I have to accept, since the amendment I put, to try and find a middle way, a way that I thought we could all live with and find out how this new policy works. Since that's been rejected, I have to make a choice. I have accepted now the criticisms. I think that perhaps I have been influenced by being a member for St Brelade, and also a member of my one member of my family operated a shop in that area for many years, and so I do know it pretty well, and I know the struggles that that have gone on to try and achieve those units in that area with very, very high rental levels, which have proven great difficulty in resulting in long periods when these premises have been closed. And so I think that's why, but on my choice now, I've decided now, and I need to say this now. Yesterday I said, well, if you don't like the amendment, I'll vote with the constable. I have changed my mind. I need to stick with the plan. The plan has been worked up. The advice I've had from the officers is that what we're doing is a policy in the plan. It does give encouragement for these range of different types of businesses to come into this area, but nonetheless, the planning system is capable of making sure that the individual decisions that go ahead on planning applications are robustly done with full stakeholder engagement and the community, and there is every procedure to be able to make sure that is controlled. So we aren't here being asked in the draft plan to go for an uncontrolled situation, merely that whether we have a policy that gives some encouragement for an area which I think does need. So, it's a difficult choice for me, but I want to make it clear to members that I will not be voting now for the Constable's amendment, despite what I did say yesterday. And I'm afraid, when you've got 100 odd amendments and the complexity of this, I think hopefully members will agree as a minister, I'm allowed to be influenced by the debate, and it's right and proper that I should be. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Minister. There's no member to speak on the amendment. Deputy Truscott.
Thank you, sir, and I'm sure members will be pleased to hear that I'm not going to speak too long on this. I think Deputy Tadier has encapsulated my thoughts really well on the subject. I was half-minded to support the amendment to the amendment. I think that was a doable halfway house, but I think on reflection and certainly listening to the Attorney General, I think the consequences of doing that would have, in my mind, been unacceptable. So I, like the Minister and the Environment Minister and Deputy Tadier, will be voting against this amendment in front of us. I think I'm an entrepreneur of spirit at heart, and I believe I will rely on the planning process and the parish hall licensing process to really govern what goes on in St Brelade. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Does anyone wish to speak on the amendment? If not, I call upon the Connotab to reply. Connotab.
Thank you, sir. And I thank those members who've spoken on this amendment. I do perceive, sir, that some members are reading more into what I'm proposing than is actually the case. The devil, sir, is in the detail of an island plan, and I don't apologise for bringing this forward. It would have been easier, of course, to do absolutely nothing. I brought the amendment as a result of representations from parishioners on the street who'd picked up that it was proposed that Le Quesnevay would become a second town, with all that might go with it, with such a policy. Postings on a parish Facebook page indicated a distinct lack of support for a secondary urban centre. This is where the phrase nighttime economy has come to the fore, and as we heard yesterday, sir, that can be open to interpretation in itself. My focus, sir, was on establishments such as nightclubs or boîtes de nuit, as they may be referred to, and I don't deny They have a place in society and are popular with many, but please, sir, not in the middle of a suburban area. I'm keen to support the pubs, cafes and other hospitality outlets in the area. Some will have live music events during their normal hours, and they're all part of a vibrant community and should be encouraged. But excessive noise, smells, fume extractors and glass bins will all have to be managed. And when this takes place late into the night, it gives rise to the complaints from residents, which I have to address as part of my role, and this is simply what I would ask members to consider. Those of us who have been involved with honorary policing duties will doubtless agree that managing late-night establishments require additional resource, which we simply don't have. So, given the rejection of the Minister's amendment, which actually casts a different light on the operation of the aforementioned pubs, cafes and so on, that is certainly something which I don't wish to condone. And I think in the light of that, sir, I would ask members for their permission to withdraw this amendment.
So you wish to withdraw the amendment. Is that seconded? Does any member wish to speak on the Conlatable's proposition that he withdraw the amendment? No. Accordingly, can the proposal that the amendment be withdrawn be adopted on a standing vote? Those in favour, please show. Thank you. Any against? Thank you. Accordingly, the amendment is withdrawn. Next is the 57th amendment lodged by the Conotable of St Brelade. There's a further amendment to this amendment lodged by you, Conotable. Do you wish to have this amendment read as amended if there's no objection, Conotable?
Yes, please.
Thank you. I invite the greffier to read the amendment as amended.
After the words the Draft Island Plan 2022-25, insert the words except that. A. Within policy ER4, at the end of subparagraph A of paragraph 5, before the semicolon, there should be inserted the words including with respect to buildings in St Brelade's Bay, if refurbished or redeveloped through further investment for such purpose. And B. Within policy ER4, after the final paragraph, there should be inserted the following new paragraph. 6. Any proposed design for the replacement of the whole or part of any site in daytime and economic use in St Brelade's Bay shall be supported by an independent professional assessment of the functionality of the design for its stated commercial purpose, including, without limitation, viability of the proposed operations with respect to storage, delivery areas, adequacy of car parking facilities, quality of disabled access if relevant, and in the case of a design for a restaurant or cafe premises, any other impediments to customer and kitchen service, highlighting any proposed design features that are likely to discourage commercial interest.
Yes, Conotable St Brelade.
Thank you, sir. And I apologise for members to polarise the debate towards St Brelade, but I shall be silent later on. This is a further proposition seeking to improve protection of the local visitor economy of St Brelade's Bay. And this has been losing land and premises to luxury housing development. It seeks consistency in the way that hotel owners are treated under the island plan compared with other owners of visitor amenity premises, although only with respect to a few remaining visitor accommodation premises in St Brelade's Bay. The proposition responds to another policy recommendation of two sets of consultants engaged at public expense who produced core evidence for the draft Bridging Island plan. The Arab economy study referred to the loss of visitor accommodation in the island. This is 50% of hotel beds in the space of 20 years, and nearly 10% last year alone. It recommended that hotel owners island-wide be restricted from converting their properties into housing without seeking further planning permission, subject to a market test in the event that there is no market for their property. The Minister responded to this by proposing a restriction with island-wide applications similar to that imposed on owners of other hospitality premises, which can be read in policy ER4 of the draft plan. The consultants who conducted the St Brelade character appraisal with reference to public opinion sought, in connection with the St Brelade Bay, similarly recommended that such a restriction be applied to hotels in the Bay. The Minister has never proposed a Bay-specific restriction despite that recommendation. The report accompanying my original proposition has paid careful attention to the Minister's post-consultation report and the report of the planning inspectors. It's anticipated that the Minister's objection, and I regret that the Minister doesn't appear to have given the same level of attention to the report accompanying the proposition. For example, in his consolidated response to this proposition, the Minister has referred to and extracted from the planning inspector's report the planning inspector's reasoning for rejecting the area-specific policy for the Bay. Yet he's failed to respond to the page 10 of the report accompanying my proposition, which explains why the inspector's reasoning is flawed. I'll spare the States members who've been afforded me the courtesy of reading the detailed report accompanying my proposition from hearing its context in its entirety. Suffice it to say, sir, the inspectors contradicted their own argument by saying a location-specific policy might be appropriate if supported by evidence prepared for the St Brelade Bay Improvement Plan. The evidence already, sir, has been provided for a location-specific policy. It was one of the policy recommendations in the St Brelade character appraisal that was produced as part of the Bridging Island Plan, core evidence at the public's expense. Like the Minister, the inspectors failed in their reasoning to mention the St Brelade character appraisal. The proposal, sir, for a St Brelade improvement plan has been included in the draft Bridging Island Plan before the consultants and recommendations had been published. They recommended the St Brelade improvement plan be developed in addition to their other policy recommendations. Unfortunately, the Bridging Island Plan and the planning inspectors have clearly ignored these policy recommendations. Perhaps, like the draft plan itself, their focus has been more on enabling more land to become available for housing development, which I fully understand, and protecting the natural environment, which I fully understand, than on preserving the island's future visitor economy, including that of St Brelade's Bay. Either way, this doesn't justify ignoring the recommendations for proactive policy interventions for the Bay. In fairness, sir, to the planning inspectors, they had a lot of information to process in a short time. And were never directly asked by the Minister to consider a Bay-specific policy. However, the Minister has referred to the lack of industry support or the Minister's proposed island-wide restrictions on hotel conversion that appears to have influenced the planning inspectors, and so shall I. Allowing hotel owners to convert their property to residential without needing further planning permission clearly allows them to instantly increase the value of their property without having to undergo the same process as farmers or restaurant owners. In that respect, the lack of restriction is clearly unfair, as it gives hotel owners a potential windfall on exit of their business that owners of other commercially used land do not have. It's a windfall that many hotels are unlikely to be willing to forego. Representatives of hotel owners predictably objected, sir. The reason argued before the planning inspector for that potential residential value of the property of an unquantified percentage of unidentified hotel owners has been or might be used to secure financing for their business operations. To lose that uplift in value could jeopardize the financial arrangements of certain hotel owners. So, sir, who are these hotel owners? I have no doubt that some exist who have arranged their affairs in this way, but bearing in mind how those in hospitality were put to proof before government handouts were given during the pandemic, what is the difference here? No evidence was given to the planning inspectors as to the number of hotel owners across the island who would suffer any hardship if the restrictions were imposed, rather than forego a nice windfall profit on disposal of their property, other than business owners, that other business owners cannot have. In short, the evidence provided to the planning inspectors was anecdotal and unsupported by hard data. I submit, sir, it's not in the public interest for planning policy to be developed in this way. Indeed, the amount of money spent on producing evidence for the draft Bridging Island plan in the form of consultants' reports would suggest the opposite. But for those seeking new sites for residential development, regardless of the impact on the island visitor economy and the island's connectivity, the lack of evidence may be less of a concern. Conversely, for those who would prefer to see hotel premises in the bay taken over by new hotel operators, once a hotel owner retires, rather than have the hotel owner cash in at the expense of the island's visitor economy and the island's economy, the evidence does matter. Research, so, into the potential impact of a restriction on hotels in the bay was provided to both the Ministers for Economic Environment and the Minister for Economic Development well before the draft Bridging Island plan was produced, with a request that they follow up the matter, given the significance of the bay to the island's tourism industry. Given so the unsubstantiated statement by that the planning inspectors regarded to be adequate evidence for their own position, it's ironic for the Minister to argue that research constituted inadequate evidence. I can make no comment, sir, on whether the lack of response by the Minister for Economic Development was related to the declared interest he has in St Helier. It may have been, nor do I know if he's spoken to the same owners of visitor accommodation in the bay as I have, subsequent to my amendment being lodged. 6 establishments in a small area of the island supported roughly a tenth of all hotel beds, the same proportion as the island lost last year. Reasons have already been provided in the report accompanying my proposition why St Bullard's Bay merits a location-specific policy for its own registered visitor accommodation. Its local tourism industry needs those numbers to survive. Consultants and the public have said so. Nevertheless, I agree with the Minister in one respect. I must respect my own demand for hard evidence rather than anecdotal evidence. And having had further discussions with the owners in the bay, I now accept it's unfair for my original proposition to exclude any visitor accommodation from its scope. No evidence of hardship arising from Senator Ferguson's amendment has been provided to me. For this reason, I'll be supporting the Senator's amendment to this proposition, and I remain aware that the Planning Committee has a statutory power to approve planning applications that are inconsistent with the island plan in any event. So finally, I'll mention that the structure of the amendment intentionally follows the form of the Minister's original amendment, adapted to exclude what is not relevant to the bay. It is a similar format to the restriction on other types of hospitality premises that is already found in policy ER4, with the additional wording I proposed to amend that policy to avoid evasion of its scope by allowing a premise to become dilapidated and unattractive to future potential operators. So, albeit complicated, and I fully understand that, I urge States members to support this as one that is in the public interest. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Conataba, is the amendment seconded?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Does Emma wish to speak on the amendment? Minister?
Yes, I was waiting for somebody to follow, sir, but I think I certainly am a little bit puzzled by the Conataba speech. A lot of, I think, what he said seemed to be very relevant to the debate to follow, which is on the 85th Amendment about hospitality, change of use, hotels, and so on. I think Amendment 57, which we're on, is about daytime and evening economy uses, and this time we're in the bay. So I did struggle to get the clarity from the Constable's speech. I think what the gist of it is that the gist is proposing that we again sort of pile on to the planning system a whole lot of checks on viability and the way in which businesses would work. I mean, just reading the proposition, where it deals with if these facilities for daytime and evening economy uses, if they're being refurbished or redeveloped through investment. And it says, needs a new paragraph. Any proposed design for the replacement of the whole of the part of any site for daytime economic use in Syria shall be supported by an independent professional assessment of the functionality of the design for its stated commercial purpose, including without limitation viability of the proposed operations with respect to storage, delivery areas, adequacy of car parking, quality of disabled access, and in the case of a design for a restaurant or cafe or other impediments to customer and kitchen service, highlighting any proposed design features that are likely to discourage commercial interest. I don't know what members feel about that, but I really, really, really struggle that we would write those words into a planning policy for anything that's done within such a daytime or evening economy uses within the bay. So even if you were going to do this, on what basis would you just select a little area and say, well, in that area, this is the rules you have to obey, but everywhere else we don't? And also, I really seriously, is it necessary? Is this really justified? We've already got in the policy, this is policy, I think we need to be clear, we're dealing here with policy ER4, which sits on page 152 of the plan. And of course we were talking about it early because this policy applies also to Lake Kennevay and St Helier, and of course at a tourist destination area. So St Bullard's Bay is a tourism destination. So ER4 applies. And it sets out there, I think, quite a workable set of tests. And it deals with issues like we spent a lot of time about noise and all that kind of thing. And then it then says that there is 0.5 on that policy says the change of use away from daytime and evening economy will only be supported where it can demonstrate that there is no market demand for the continued use of the premises for daytime and evening economy uses. And the case of tourism destination areas, there is no unacceptable adverse effect on the character of the tourist destination area, and the overall benefit to the community demonstrably outweighs the adverse loss of daytime. So from my point of view, sir, that is an entirely a workable policy in ER4. So to add to it, as this Proposition 57 proposes, what it seems to be is a very, very complex set of things. Some of those things in that list in the proposition are, of course, covered by already disabled access, for example, strikes me. That's in building regulations. It's the law. You have an evening and a daytime use, you have to provide that. It's not a question of planning policy, it's law. Car parking is obviously related to, that's a normal planning consideration. So the planning process will deal with that. But when we get onto commercial viability, I think we've got this market test. What that means is, look, if you're operating a venue such as this in a tourist area, before you change it out to anything else, you just need to demonstrate that there is no market interest for somebody else to take that up. That's what is in that policy. And that's part of the rules. And it's been that case for, well, since the last island plan, I think, that is normal. So I don't think the CONITAB has made a good case here for adding in St Bullard's Bay this extra provision. And of course, what we can do, there is, of course, a reminder throughout these island plan debates with these policies, members would say, well, where do we pick up the issues of detail? I think I'd like to remind members that the Minister has the power in every one of these policies to issue what we call SPGs or supplementary planning guidance. And what that does is it sets out a bit of more explanation of the policy and the way it's meant to work and the way planning decisions will put it into practice in a lot more detail. So on every policy where you've got a complex thing like this, you can have SPGs, and everybody will be pleased to know that a minister, before they can issue an SPG, is subject to statutory consultation. So I think there are real safeguards. So, you know, going back to the proposition we've got, if we were going to have these extra tests in St Bullards, why not put them in Goree? Why don't put them in St Albans? Why not put them in St Wan's Bay? So I'm sorry, sir. I don't think the case is there. And of course, the independent planning inspectors, what did they say? They say Amendment 57 seeks changes to policy ER4 to include additional requirements for market demand testing and functional suitability tests regarding changes of use from David. We agree with the Minister that such requirements would be unduly onerous and preclude visitor accommodation, sir. So in that case, I urge the Constable's Amendment 57, and I think there's an amendment to the amendment from the Constable, I think. I'm not sure. Perhaps not. But
We're debating the amendment as amended.
Thank you, sir. So I will be voting against the amendment as amended.
Thank you, Minister. Does anyone wish to speak on this amendment? Not. I call upon the Connotab to reply.
Thank you, sir, and I thank the Minister for his comments. So, yes, it is a complex amendment. The island plan is a complex document, and I have tried to address the complexity of it to the betterment of the visitor economy in St Bullards Bay. I'm not going to speak any further than this on that, so I would simply move to ask for the appel.
Thank you. The appel has been called for. Members are invited to return to their seats. Those joining the meeting by the Teams link are invited to cast their votes in the chat channel, and I ask the greffier to open the voting for members in the chamber. If all members have the opportunity of casting their votes, then I ask the greffier to close the voting. Announce that the amendment has been rejected, 9 votes pour and 25 votes contra.
So I didn't register my vote. It didn't make any difference, to be honest, as the going goes, but I did vote pour, but I missed my button. I was a bit late. Apologies.
Thank you. Next is the 85th amendment, lodged by the Connotab of St Brelard. Connotab, am I right in understanding from your comments in the last debate that you wish to have your amendment read as amended by Senator Ferguson's amendment? Is that correct?
Yes, please, sir.
If members are content with that, then the 85th amendment will be read as amended by Senator Ferguson's small amendment to it. Greffier.
After the words the Draft Island Plan 2020 to 25, insert the words except that. Within policy EV1, the following paragraph should be inserted after the sixth paragraph. Changes of use of visitor accommodation offering more than 58 beds will not be supported in St Brelade's Bay unless it is demonstrated that 1, there is no market demand for the continued use of the premises for visitor accommodation, including if refurbished or redeveloped through further investment for such purpose, and 2, there is no unacceptable adverse effect on the intrinsic character of St Brelade's Bay as a tourist destination area.
Griffiths, can I have a quick word about what we've just read out? Greffier will
apologies, I read out the wrong one.
Amendment again as amended.
After the words the Draft Island Plan 2022-25, insert the words except that within policy EV1, the following paragraph should be inserted after the sixth paragraph. Changes of use of visitor accommodation offering will not be supported in St Brelade's Bay unless it is demonstrated that 1, there is no market demand for the continued use of the premises for visitor accommodation, including if refurbished or redeveloped through further investment for such purpose, and 2, there is no unacceptable adverse effect on the intrinsic character of St Brelade's Bay as a tourist destination area.
Yes, Conatap.
Thank you, sir. And once again, this is an amendment to enhance the provision of visitor accommodation in St Brelade's Bay. I'm not going to expound at length on the matter. It is simply that it is proposed to formulate a policy to enable the continuation of hotel provision in the Bay. It is an important part of the island's economy, and we've seen hotels falling away significantly, as I referred to in my previous speech, and I'm keen that that doesn't continue. I look forward to hearing responses for those who've been in the hotel business or who are familiar with the operation of it. And likewise, I'm sure Senator Ferguson will support her proposition, which I do too. So without further ado, sir, I make the proposition.
Is the proposition seconded?
Yes, sir. So can I just check, this is the 136 beds that we're talking about of offering more than 136 beds? I'm looking at the right amendment to the amendment.
The words offering more than 58 beds have been deleted. The Conetab has accepted the amendment of Senator Ferguson. Conetab, I understand you're not going to propose your second amendment, are you?
No, sir.
So the wording is changes of use of visitor accommodation will not be supported. The reference to any bed numbers has been removed.
Thank you, sir. I'm glad I asked. Thank you.
Before I ask members to speak, yesterday I gave a ruling in relation to a declaration of interest in relation to St Brelade's Bay on another amendment, which indicated that the declaration in that context did not amount to a financial interest preventing a member from voting. Of course, this is a different amendment which relates to 6 specific, they're listed in Senator Ferguson's amendments, 6 specific premises. And I think that a member indicated yesterday that he was a shareholder in one of those premises. I think that that shareholding should be declared and would amount to a financial interest shared with a small number of other persons in the context of this debate, and accordingly any member affected should not vote on any proposition relating to this matter. So do you want to make a declaration again?
I do, sir. I'm a shareholder in the Biarritz Hotel. I'll take your advice.
Yes.
Thank you very much for that clarification.
Thank you, Deputy.
Yes, sir. I'm I'm also a shareholder in the Biarritz Hotel, but as well as a director. But I would point out that there are 127 shareholders in the Biarritz Hotel, so I'm not sure that our shareholdings are particularly significant in the context of this.
Well, it's a matter of fact and degree in every case. I know that the bailiff's guidance refers to the number of 100, but I think in the context of this particular debate, that does amount to a direct interest, and accordingly, any members with such an interest in relation to these 6 premises have an interest as defined by Standing Order 106. Yes, Senator Farnham.
Oh, it was only to say, sir, I do have an association with a hotel on the island. I thought I'd just remind members for the record, but I do not believe I'm conflicted in any way because it is not located in St. Brelade, but I just wanted to remind members of that fact, sir.
Yes. Yes,
Sir, I'm similarly associated with a hotel, but this hotel is in town, sir.
Thank you. Yes. Does anyone wish to speak on the amendment? Yes.
So I feel I have to speak because in regard to hospitality business in general and tourism in the island, we do realise that St. Brelade's Bay is one of the jewels in the crown of the hospitality business. However, hospitality owners and managers are only able to continue their work if the hotels are viable. And this is dependent on many factors. Hoteliers in general don't want to sell their hotels. We trade for, and some of us, for life. We're like teachers. It's what we do. We accept long hours, limited profitability, etc., etc. And I can't stand and allow a situation to unfold whereby hands are tied when a hotel becomes unviable. I've had 2 different experiences in hotels. In 1989-92, I owned the Kalamunda Hotel in Goree. During that time, there was a huge recession. I was badly advised, but I took the advice that was given to me by lawyers, accountants, and bankers. And we know that in 1989-92, there was a huge recession based basically on huge increases in interest rates, which I think went up to 15% base. I was on 17.5%. And technically, I tried to trade through it, and I probably had about 2 months to go, and I had to sell up. And technically, I was bankrupt. But I was like a little phoenix, and I got back to my trade and went forth and managed to get another business together. You cannot tie the hands of people who struggle to make money no matter what their trade is. The situation in hospitality is dire at the moment because of COVID. We've had help from government, good help from government, and that has worked, and various businesses, including our own, are greatly indebted to the government for help along the way. But as far as making a prescriptive law, effectively, that says you can't dispose of your hotel, I can't stand here and allow that to happen. So I do realise that St. Brelade is one of the jewels in the crown. I mean, hospitality is polarised to Goree, St. Helier and St. Brelade's. We do need those hotel beds. From my point of view, I think the hotels in St. Brelade's are pretty viable because of the beautiful location there. But as far as tying the hands to hoteliers and not enabling them to get out when the time is right, I can't agree with it. Thank you.
Thank you, Conor. Yes, Minister of the Environment.
Thank you, sir. I'm very grateful for the Conotable St. Clement because I think that reflects the feedback that I've had all along in dealing with planning issues as far as hospitality visitor accommodation. Obviously, this debate now is about EV1. It's a different policy. It's about our policies for visitor accommodations. For those members that would want to have a look at it, it's page 159. And I think, as long as I can remember, going right back until, well, certainly to 2002, there was when I think really we started to lose tourism hotels, when we had, I think, can't remember the exact number, but from my recollection, it got pretty close to 30,000 beds in that time. And of course, the reality is that we saw a very large number of those hotels go, a lot of them were acquired by government. In those days, government used to intervene and used to buy those hotels and develop them for social housing. All those left-wing ideas have all been in the bin for the last 10 years, and we rely on the market. But nonetheless, the market still is healthy, and where those hotels are not viable, or they've gone into residential development in town. I mean, we could all walk around. There's hardly a site now in town that where there wasn't a hotel, where there was previously a hotel is now an apartment block. And the reality is, had that not taken place, we would be in a worse situation for housing. That's the reality. But I think now, and so throughout the time now, there has been this question, can we have safeguards in a planning policy to try and put restrictions on hotel owners from changing their use? And that, of course, now is the proposal we have, the amended proposal from the Constable St Brelade. Entirely understandable, because the wonderful hotels in St Brelade's Bay, I mean, they are the gems. I can't think what this island's tourism industry would be like if we lost these very top level of hotels. Now, except there are other top level hotels that are not in St Brelade's Bay. Other hotels are available, as it were, as they say in the media. But nonetheless, the reason why I feel those are so important to us, because I think if we were to lose those places, the jewels in the crown in those sites, those special pieces, special parts of our coasts, I don't see future planning ministers come along to say, well, we now need to give up another prime site on some unspoilt coast and make it into a hotel. I don't think that ever happening. So looking after those assets and trying to work with those owners and support them in sustaining the viability is essential. And the feedback that the Connétable St Clement has given is come at me loud and clear, all along. And so, but I did feel it necessary to ask for the planning inspector's view of whether or not I should consider putting in what we call a market test. So in other words, some kind of procedure where we have to market hotels and, to make sure they just couldn't be lost without that test. And the advice of the inspector is absolutely not. It is not appropriate to apply a market test. And so I did not proceed with that. I mean, there were a lot of representations at the planning inquiry. I listened to them, and I have to concede that. And also there's the practicalities, I think, is that a lot of, this is perhaps a personal view, and it's not really a planning view, and I may be slightly adrift on this. But our tourism industry, I think, in its early forms in the 70s and 80s, people grew up with that, and they reached older years. And, the issues of retirement came. Very successful businesses, but obviously if the business wasn't viable, they've had to go from the industry. And so what we've seen then is that a 50% loss of beds in the 22 years to 2014, a reduction in tourist premises of number of premises, this is, from 387 in 1992 to 120 in 2021. And during 2021, there's been inquiries about a potential change of use of a loss of another 2,000 bed spaces. But of course, against this, we've seen growth and investments in new and extended hotels, Premier Inns. And also, we've seen proposals for apart hotels, which kind of responds to the changed market. And then, of course, we've got niche hotel products, for example, Millbrook Manor. And I would add to this list, it doesn't say it in my note, I think the policy, the policy now explicitly encourages self-catering visiting accommodation. So that's, I think, something which is important as well, because we are, I believe, short of that. So those things are within the policy. And so they thought that the inspector advised that a series of tests that was proposed as is here would be unlikely to achieve the objective of supporting the tourism industry, and it would create great difficulties of implementation in how you would actually even do it, and to try and make a viability test would be unlikely to be effective and can actually work against the very thing that we're seeking to do. And of course, in my view, that's generally a sound conclusion. And certainly, if there's no case for the rest of the island, then I don't see that there can be a case for hotels in St Brelade's Bay. I don't think there's any way we could do it. So therefore, they're saying, stick with the current drafted plan. I think that's probably as much I need to say. But I would, in closing, I do accept the Constable's good intention in this. It's a debate we need to have in this place, because I don't think they've had that debate previously, and I think the reasons for not having such market tests are very useful to air. And if members have other views on that matter, I think it's important to have that debate. But I would ask it to be focused on the terms of policy EV1 on page 159, unamended by the Constable's amendment, because I shan't be supporting it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Gorst.
Thank you, sir. And I think really the Minister and the Connétable of St Clement have summed up the points that I wish to make. I do understand the Connétable's desire to maintain the bay as a tourist destination and have beds in that bay. But I fear that the proposal before us will actually hasten, potentially, hoteliers leaving the marketplace, because what they may find themselves with is distressed assets that they can't invest in because the capital value has been amended by this proposal, and therefore if they can't invest in them, they become less attractive. And ultimately what potentially happens is it hastens the day that those hoteliers then leave the tourist arena. They're not going to be able to then use those assets for residential because the planning restrictions will be onerous in this particular way. So they then have a choice of either selling a distressed asset at below previous market value, or sitting on the property in vacant form until there is a change of policy and people become so frustrated with the vacant eyesore that they allow a different planning use. And these are not just thoughts plucked from the air. So this is a policy that has been tried in the past, as the planning minister, the environment minister himself indicated. and all of the advice I've received is that it did not work in the past. I see no evidence of it working now. Rather, I fear it will hasten the very thing that I know that the CONITAB is wishing to avoid. And it's for those reasons, sir, that I can't support this amendment today. Does there need to be a thought about how beds are maintained in the bay and a coming together? I think there does, and I think we see over the course of this island plan that the CONITAB of St Brelade is absolutely committed to that. I know that the Minister for Economic Development is also committed to that, and I think there is value in the CONITAB and the Minister giving further consideration to policy interventions which would enable what the CONITAB is desiring to achieve, because I do not believe that this amendment achieves it, and I fear rather the reverse, that it hastens the reduction of beds in the bay for all of the reasons that the CONITAB of St Clement has indicated. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Mezek.
Thank you, sir. The longer that this island plan debate goes on, the more I begin to fear that we are sleepwalking into developing an island plan which fails to protect all that is special about Jersey. And I feel that way having listened to some of the speeches against this amendment. When I read this amendment, I was particularly enthusiastic to support it, precisely because I've been so appalled in the last few years at parts of our coastline being taken out of a use for which the public can enjoy and instead being put into the use for which only a tiny number of extremely wealthy people can enjoy. And I want to support anything I can to stop that from happening in the future, because I want our coastline and the premises that exist on it to get maximum use from those who want to enjoy what Jersey's got to offer, locals and visitors alike. I think that the wording of this has appropriate safeguards in it to accept what may be the reality of a situation from time to time for particular venues and their owners. It says, unless it is demonstrated that there is no market demand for the continued use of the premises for visitor accommodation. So that does not exclude the possibility of a particular business and venue becoming unviable for whatever reason, if the economy changes or if it's a particular type of visitor accommodation offering that's no longer desirable, and if a business simply cannot be made to work, then this doesn't stop its use being able to be changed. It will be able to do so. It will just have to demonstrate that that's the case. If, however, it is actually not about the use of that site objectively for its purpose, but instead about the circumstances of the owner may well run into financial difficulties that are not necessarily to do with the wider economy and the wider desire for use of that site, but whatever may have arisen in their personal business affairs that mean they can't be in that business anymore. It just means for one of those people, they'll have to sell it on to a business person who can make it work, who does have the ability to continue it in that use for visitor accommodation. It means they can't seek to have a massive capital gain by selling it off or developing it into luxury housing or what have you, and the island and St Brelade's Bay in particular lose out on that type of business in that special part of the island which we ought to be trying to preserve. So I see this as striking that balance between trying to be realistic and accepting that not every business will last forever. Circumstances can change and things may need to change along with it. With balancing that with protections to stop us losing sites that could be viable if they were run potentially by a different owner or if some investment was made into them to keep them desirable. And if that's not possible, you can prove it. You just have to make that part of your application to get it changed. So this amendment strikes me as totally reasonable, and at its heart is about trying to preserve a special part of our island. And we've had this with this amendment and the previous one as well, where some of the arguments from the Environment Minister have seemed to be the objection to treating St Brelade's Bay as a special case. And in the previous one, he said, well, why not Goree and why not elsewhere? Well, good question, and that's for him to answer why he hasn't put greater protections in the island plan as he's lodged it, because I'm extremely worried about those other sites as well. I would dread to think what would happen if we allowed greed to take over and the Goree village, Goree village at the foot of Montague Castle were able to lose all of the hospitality offerings there and simply turn it into luxury mansions instead. I would absolutely dread that. But what we have is taking St Brelade's Bay, which is a unique part of the island, and at least try and apply that principle there to ensure that it can continue to be a particular offering for the island, a tourist destination, but also a place for locals to enjoy as well. And I see nothing wrong with doing that. And if treating it as a special case is some sort of problem, well, I think that's a problem with the island plan as is lodged instead. So I urge members to support this amendment to try to protect the future of St Brelade's Bay and balance that with the realistic expectation that sometimes some premises may have to change use, but we require that to be done objectively and try to rein in the behaviour of some business people who may seek, quite understandably, because people want to make money and people want to try to do what's best for them and their family, but to rein that in when it's not in the wider public interest of preserving this part of the island and the economic offering that it's provided by having visitor accommodation there. To say, if we're going to lose it, you've got to prove that there really was no alternative. So I urge members to support this amendment.
Thank you, Senator. Deputy Tadier.
Thanks, sir. And sorry if I missed the first part of Senator Mezek's speech, so I'm sorry if I repeat any of it. I don't know if I will, but as I see it, even with this amendment, there is still a possibility for changes of use. It just means that it's got to be demonstrated according to the criteria that Senator Ferguson's put in, that there's no market demand for the continued use of the premises, and that there should be no adverse effect on the character of St Brelade's Bay as a tourist destination. I don't see why we wouldn't all sign up to those words, because it seems to me it provides the best of both worlds. It says, look, we're not trying to freeze the bay in aspic. We are also aware that economic changes can take place and there can be industrial shifts in what are the major industries in Jersey, and we've seen that over decades and centuries, of course. So I'm a bit bemused by some of the strong opposition to this. And of course, if it were the case that everything in the garden was rosy and that we didn't need this, we might not be inclined to support this or entertain it. But let's put this back in the context of what's going on around the island and the public uproar that there's been, because our coast, we only have one coast. It's a strange thing to say because, of course, as mathematicians will know, any coastline is infinite, but land isn't infinite. And so whether we're looking at places like Greve de Lec or we're considering Bully Bay, both areas that I also love, as much as St Brelade's Bay for different reasons, it's about wanting to protect the character of the bay and also the fabric and the economy of the bay. So there are real examples of where this has gone wrong, and it's not like in decades ago. I'm not talking about Portland now. I'm not talking about the Plemore headland, where it could have been a completely different story. We do remember Plemore and the way it divided the island, and it was really controversial, and there was such a strong desire from an amazing lobby group led by the National Trust who saw the vision for that area to put it back to nature. But it could have quite easily been a big development up there, or a development. It was down to states members to say, no, this should be put back to nature. And so that was about a change of use. It's about a defunct holiday park. And it was right that there was some intervention from the states there. But what has happened at Greve de Lec is that you've got a cafe area. Yes, it was privately owned, but it was a public amenity. And it was a place where people could go. It was their area. They might have to pay and buy a cup of tea or an afternoon cream tea or an ice cream, whatever. But that was a public amenity and facility. And the same with the Bully Bay, the hotel there, it was Water's Edge, I think it was called. Now, what does it come to when that has just gone from being a hotel, it's been left vacant for ages, and now that's just one sole private residence? What does that mean for the island? And this is happening now under the current policy, and it will continue to happen if we're not careful. And when the minister says, oh, I can't see a future planning minister allowing this kind of thing to happen, well, it's happened under the current planning minister. It's happened under him, on his watch. All of these places around the coast have been lost. And luckily there are people in the Assembly and perhaps outside of the Assembly too who are saying, no, we want to make sure that this kind of thing doesn't happen. Because I could quite easily see a scenario where one of the hotels just says, you know what, I want to sell up. Now's the right time to get out of the market, like the Constable of St Clement has said. And I'm just going to turn these into apartments. Now, I don't think the planning department is going to have to specify what kind of apartments they can be. They're not going to be that interventionist. They will be luxury apartments. And they will either be for people who are HNWs, high net worth, I don't even like that expression, that's probably why I get it wrong, but the 21Es, do we want to see that area just being bought up with luxury apartments, big concrete and glass buildings, which are subjective, of course, but Senator Ferguson has compared them to bunkers, interesting blocos, as they would call them in French, and they're big blocks on the front, which are not going to enhance the bay's character at all. So for me, this is something which probably doesn't go far enough, but we should certainly be supporting this amendment as amended. Otherwise, when we get those buildings and the changes of use, and we all throw our hands up in the air and say, oh, well, them's the rules, we can't stop people from having legitimate enjoyment of their property and disposing it. And, the economy shifted, tourists aren't coming here anymore. I don't buy into the fact that these are all going to become, if they do change use, they're all going to become tourist apartments, and even if they do, you don't get the facilities there. So whether it's St Brillard's Bay Hotel with the DW Sports Club behind it, whether it's the L'Horizon, which is used not just by tourists, but by so many locals for functions, for weddings, for the gym, for afternoon teas there, and the other offerings we've got across there, which I'm not going to name all of them. They add to the richness of the bay for all of us, and this is about putting reasonable protections in there, sir. So it certainly has my full support as a St Brelard deputy.
Thank you, Deputy. Does anyone wish to speak on this amendment? Yeah, Deputy.
Sir, I'd like members to reminisce of their trips abroad and think about walking in the center of town. So you're in Paris, you're in one of the really nicer areas of Paris, and look around. And you'll find that in the most expensive places, hotels are what you find. Basically, a hotel is the most lucrative use of real estate. There is absolutely nothing else that makes more money than a hotel. You cannot rent a one-bedroom a one-bedroom apartment, a studio, you're not even an apartment, no kitchen. You cannot rent a studio for £50,000 a year anywhere. But you can rent a hotel room for £50,000 a year. There is nothing that makes more money than a hotel. And of course, if you're in the business, you know that renting rooms is only half of your business. The rest of it, the food, is the other half. So out of your real estate, out of your square meters, a hotel is the best investment you can make anywhere. And that's why in the center of the most expensive towns in the world, what you find are hotels, where it's really difficult to have an office, where it's impossible to have an apartment, there's going to be a hotel. The most expensive locations all over the world. So if you cannot make money with a hotel, there really, really is a reason. You know, it's completely obvious. We do not need to intervene in this. If a location in Jersey cannot make money as a hotel cannot work. It doesn't mean that somebody else can come in and turn it into a different hotel and that will be so successful. No, there are just not enough people walking around to use it. That's all it is. So why would we need to intervene in something where the market does its own adjustments? We don't. We don't need to regulate and indeed risk damaging that business because all of a sudden the premises upon which they borrowed money have just changed now. We've changed the rules and all of a sudden the collateral that they offered to get a loan doesn't work anymore. It's not possible. Their chance of getting a return on their investment doesn't work anymore. So Senator Gorst was perfectly right. The only thing that we're going to do here is to hasten the demise of those hotels. And that's it. The other thing, of course, is that the one thing that we could look at, but it's, of course, extremely difficult, is how those sites could be preserved in the future. Because we do have a problem now. We have a decreasing need for beds. But that may change in 30 or 40 years. So how we take care of that, how we make sure that the investment can be turned back into a hotel, how the land can be turned back into a hotel, it could be important. That's something that we could look at. And of course, the really ironic bit about this is that it is much, much easier to turn an immense villa back into a hotel than 200 apartments, which you have to wait until the building is completely derelict and nobody can possibly live there before there will be a change of use. So I think that here we are really fighting against what would naturally occur in the economy. We don't need to help it. We're only going to damage it. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy St Mary.
Thank you, sir. And to a certain extent, the last speaker has addressed the point I was going to make. Like other speakers, I have every sympathy with the rationale behind the proposition made by the Constable St Brelard. But again, I do query whether it is going to be counterproductive. The obvious point I make, I'm not sure it's been stressed quite enough, is that in seeking financial assistance from a bank to develop a hotel or anything, the bank will be concerned to know that they have free right of disposal at a certain time. And as the last speakers mentioned, if this restriction were made, the nature of the security has diminished overnight. That is one thing, and that might introduce pressure brought on existing businesses. The greater concern I have is that any new business starting up might have difficulty in finding a financial backer, given that they will not have free right of disposal at certain stages. So I align myself very firmly with the excellent contribution made by the Constable St Clement in the first instance, that this restriction is unnecessary and I fear will be counterproductive. Thanks, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Higgins.
Thank you, sir. And I'm pleased actually to follow the likes of Deputy Giger and Deputy Gorst and others, because their approach to the island has always been laissez-faire. Let the market rule. Supply and demand. No one looks at the strategic interests of the island. Now, we have an economy that is based on finance. And yes, we have 12,500 people employed in it, which we're grateful for, and it does generate a lot of money. But if we look at the contribution of the finance industry to economic growth in this island over the last decade or so, it's basically flatlined. And therefore, and we also don't know what the future of finance will be. We see many things going on in the world at the present time, many changes, and we don't know what's going to be around the corner. So one time, Jersey's economy was based on a three-legged stool. There was agriculture, there was tourism, and there was finance. And what we've done is we've allowed finance to dominate. Now, if anything happens to finance, this island is up the creek. In a number of ways, 12,500 jobs could be at risk. Equally, all the money that these people have been paid and they put into housing will cause a run on housing. We need to be looking at this island strategically. Now, tourism, I still think, has a future. And the important difference between finance and tourism is the fact that the island has many natural attributes, which mean if we can develop those attributes, we can still have a place for tourism. Finance, the decisions will be made in London, New York, and elsewhere, not necessarily in Jersey, as any of those in the States who have been in finance know. The decisions are made at the head offices, and it's their interests, not the island's interests, that are taken into account. Now, I do believe in tourism. I've always believed in event-led tourism. Now, I've lamented the fact that we've allowed so many sites on the seashore, effectively, or on the coastline, to be sold into very expensive flats. And I agree with basically Deputy Taddia. We have an island now that is basically for sale. Anybody who wants to come in and wants to spend an awful lot of money will get what they want. So what we have then is a strategic interest in supporting tourism. Now, we need a policy for that. And in the absence of a policy, and I blame successive council ministers for that lack of policy, I believe that we should perhaps be giving favourable loans to hoteliers to develop. We should be developing the tourism industry. It does offer alternative employment. Maybe not at the moment, and they may have trouble filling those jobs. But if anything happens to finance, well, people have got to make a decision. Do you go into hospitality or do you leave the island? And so there's many choices going forward. So the point I'm trying to make here, although the proposition is concerned with St. Brelade Bay, which I accept is the jewel of the crown, it's my favourite bay of all in the island. We need to protect it, and we need to make sure that, as I say, it's just not sold to the highest bidder and taken away from the people of the island, because that is what is happening. I've had people coming to me about rights of way, whereas they've been allowed to walk on certain land as part of their walks. And we've now found we've got new owners coming in who are buying up all the surrounding fields and preventing people going on their traditional walks. The island is changing, and we need to take a stand at some point and say no further. So I would say I support the Constable of St. Brelade with his proposition. It may not be the very best, but it's the best thing we've got in the absence of a policy at the moment to stop losing hotels and stop losing the ability of islanders to enjoy their own island. So I urge members to support this. Look at the wider picture. It is not just St. Brelade's Bay. It is the future of this island and what we're going to leave our children. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Truscott.
Thank you, sir. This has been an interesting debate, and I've got well, for one, there have been rumours abound recently that a developer has purchased one of the larger hotels in the Bay, and many people have emailed me and contacted me with great concern over that, and understandably. Understand that is not the case. I've actually spoken to the developer involved, or certainly indicated that they were involved, and they totally denied it. Yes, the Bay is a wonderful bay, one of the best in Europe, and I can go back to the 1960s where you could hardly move for the amount of people sunbathing from the hotels there, and it was a very vibrant area. and still is to a degree. And one has got to make the comment that if a hotel in such a wonderful location cannot make a profit, then there is either something wrong with the offering of that hotel, or we have a major problem with tourism going forward in general. And of course, over the past 8 years, I've sat on planning and really voted on the demise of many of our hotels. The most recent one, the Apollo. I am a free marketeer and do believe in letting the markets, to a degree, determine what goes on. And I also believe in a level playing field. So it seems a little unjust, one could argue, in some ways, on the hoteliers and owners of the hotels in the Bay, that they are being singled out for this policy, albeit that it is designed plainly to protect the Bay's vibrancy and tourist options. But just over the headlands, you've got another sizable hotel that is in the free market. So it does seem a little unjust in that respect. And of course, I have been contacted by certainly one of the owners in the Bay, and he quite plainly stated that his borrowing is geared against the open market value of his hotel. And I'm not sure of the other major concerns in the Bay, what their borrowing has been geared against. I presume it's a similar thing. I think there's always consequences of agreeing to something like this on the businesses involved. To a degree, I'm still on the, and I look forward to the Constable's summing up to the amendment. It is difficult going forward, trying to get that balance right in cases like this. So it'll be interesting to hear what the Constable has to say. Thank you, sir. But I've just got to add that raising the bar slightly, just putting that, prove redundancy, prove that your business isn't viable, is something that I can latch onto. But it worries me that perhaps should apply for all hotels throughout the island going forward. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Yes, Deputy Royal.
Thank you, sir. It has been a really interesting debate, and one of the reasons it's interesting is because you have two different views, obviously, coming up against each other. And it's a view, so the view from the amendments perspective is one that a family member asked me recently. She said, why don't you just protect all the hotel sites? Why don't you stop them going out and being turned into, obviously, flats is the main main alternative source for them. And so I explained what I'm about to explain now, and which, to be fair, we have heard. But it's the reason why I can't support this amendment, as well-intentioned as it is. And it is definitely the sort of amendment which I think most people, it's instinctive. You want to stop something happening, so you just ban it, you just prevent it happening, you put in a law or a regulation to stop it happening. That's how most of us, and particularly politicians, that's how we tend to react to things, because we think it's all within our power. But this amendment actually speaks to the lack of power that we have as politicians. This amendment butts up against, and Senator Mezek said this very well, reality. And the reality is this: every business in the island is a business that has taken risk. I think that's something that some states members don't quite understand. Business people, whatever their business, take risk. And they take risk because they put their money, their assets down. They invest it in something with a view to making that investment make more money. Obviously, the flip side is the investment they make may not make the money they had hoped for various reasons. And if it doesn't make the money they hope for, obviously the business will collapse and they need to leave. Now, the thing with hotels is they're highly capital-intensive businesses. So when someone decides, so let's think, you're a hotel chain in the UK and you're looking at Jersey as a possible place for investment. And so you identify a property and you think that would be a really good property. Look, it's in St. Brillard's Bay. It's got a beautiful sea view. Let's look at buying that property and turning it into a hotel, or making the hotel it currently is even better. So that hotel chain in the UK looks at the island, looks at St Billard's Bay and thinks, you know, it will cost an amount. It will cost £1 million to sort this out. Right, we want to go and borrow the £1 million, or we want to borrow part of that £1 million to make this hotel project work. They obviously go to the banker. They go to their lenders and say, would you lend us this £1 million, please? And the banker has got one thought in mind. If this business doesn't work, if the risk that this hotel chain in the UK is willing to take in Jersey doesn't work, what will I, as the lender, the banker, have in return when that business fails? If that property is protected in the way that the Connétable is suggesting, that asset that the bank will be left with, should that business fail, is worth markedly less than that asset if it isn't protected in the way that the Connétable is saying. So the banker turns around and says, sorry, we're not going to lend you this money. We're not going to lend you the money to invest in this hotel in St Billard's Bay. Because the sad reality, and it is a sad reality, the bankers care about one thing and one thing only, and that's protecting the money that they lend. This protection that we want to put, or the Connétable wants to put on St Billard's Bay in terms of hotels, removes the protection for the bankers and the lenders. That's the reality of this amendment. It's not a nice reality. It's not one that I endorse. It's not one that I live happily with, but it is the reality. It's exactly the same for existing hoteliers. So there are some fantastic hotels in St Billard's Bay. I assume, and it's entirely an assumption, that those properties, particularly for the bigger hotels, are entirely paid for. I assume that there's not much lending on those properties because they've been hotels for a long, long time. It's only an assumption. I could be so wrong. But if any of those hoteliers at the current hotels in St Billard's Bay want to refurbish, they want to extend the offering, they want to make the product that they offer to tourists coming to Jersey even better, they will usually do that through borrowing. It's then exactly the same story. They go to the bank and they say, we want to refurbish our rooms to bring them up to 21st century standards. Not that they're not, but bring them up to the highest possible standards so we can offer a 5-star service in Jersey in St Billard's Bay. The banker will look at their offering and say, okay, you want to borrow £1 million to do so? How much will we get back should you fail? Should this investment not work? Should the risk you are taking as the business owner fail? What will we get back as the bankers? With this protection, the banker will not get back the same money that they put in. They, as the banker, will look at that and say, sorry, the property you are talking about is restricted in how it can be sold, therefore it is worth a lot less than it would be if it was on the open market. And so the banker turns around and says, sorry, we're not giving you that £1 million to invest in your property. So what happens? Jersey is left with people not investing in Jersey's hotel accommodation. As a result, Jersey's hotel accommodation offering slowly declines. As that slow decline continues, Jersey is a visitor attraction for people. And remember, we're up against Mallorca, we're up against Ibiza, we're up against Cyprus, we're up against Greece, we're up against Spain, we're up against Italy, we're up against all of these amazing places where it's sunnier and warmer, and you can guarantee that you'll get a suntan when you come back, which sadly is not something we can guarantee in Jersey at any time of year, as much as I wish we could. And so if we aren't able to invest, if those hoteliers who take those risks aren't able to invest to either buy a new property and turn it into a hotel or invest in their current hotels, if they're unable to do so, as has been said, as Senator Gore said, Jersey slowly exits the visitor accommodation market, whether it likes it or not. That's what happens. And that's why it's so difficult to vote, in my view, for this very well-intentioned amendment. It takes Jersey out of the market. And so, at the end of the day, a distressed asset will be sitting there. The people who own it, or the bank which has taken possession of it, will be trying to sell it on, and they won't be able to. And so you then end up with a redundant building in St Billard's Bay, which slowly falls apart and decays because it's unable to be sold on, because no one wants it to work as a business, or because it is unable to work as a business. And I did find one thing interesting in one of the previous speakers where they said, well, if the business isn't working, sell it to someone who can make it work. That, to me, shows a fundamental lack of understanding of how businesses work. Sometimes that is the case. Deputy Morel runs a business, it doesn't work because he's not a very good businessman. That's quite possible. Somebody else will look at it and say, you know what, Deputy Morel's not made a good bunch of this business, a good bit of this business, so I'll take it on and I'll run it better. But there is a truth in that sometimes when things aren't working, it's not because the business person isn't running it properly, it's because they haven't been able to get investment to keep it at the top end of the market where it needs to be to compete against Mallorca and so on. Or it's just that there aren't enough tourists coming to Jersey anymore in general because they want to go to warmer climes further south and guarantee their suntan. So there is no guarantee. This idea that one hotelier who doesn't make it work will be able to sell it to another hotelier who will make it work, that's absolute pie in the sky thinking. And it really does show a lack of understanding of how business can work. If the business fails as a hotel because it's not because Jersey isn't attracting people anymore, then no business person will make that work. And so this is a case of unintended consequences. If we do this, there is a genuine possibility that investment in St Brelade's Bay hotel accommodation will dry up. As a result of that, we won't have hotels operating in St Brelade's Bay, but we could end up with empty shells decaying in St Brelade's Bay. And so I do ask members, we've heard from one person who is a hotelier. They, as a hotelier, were saying this isn't the right course of action. And so I do say that's the person we should listen to, in my view. The person who has run a hotel, who runs a hotel, or has run a hotel, sorry, I'm not sure of the exact status currently, and knows how it works. The rest of us are lay people trying to get the best understanding we can. But we are in danger here of actually saying, you know what, don't invest any further in St Brelade's Bay, because that is, in my view, the very likely unintended consequence of this amendment. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Senator Farnham.
Thank you, sir. I feel I should just say a few words as a Minister with responsibility for tourism. I'm pleased to follow the Assistant Minister, who's been a great asset. His views are very, very helpful in the department. I concur with most of them, but all of them on this issue, and I've spoken to the Constable separately about this issue, but I just wanted to share a little bit of further information that I think members might find helpful. I first want to say that it's always has been the aim of the department with our tourism policies. We're working on a new tourism strategy at the moment, which will be published prior or during this form of government. And our aim is to not only promote Jersey, but to ensure we have the right number of hotel beds and bed nights available, sir, in the right type of accommodation. The consumer appetite for accommodation has changed considerably since the 1980s and the 1990s, with a more modern consumer seeking out far greater hotel and hospitality experiences. Of course, the industry suffered greatly from what we used to call the prime site policy, which practically forced all hotels to stay in the industry, which led, as we know, back in the day, to significant underinvestment because, as the Constable of St Clements, a well-regarded member of the industry, pointed out earlier, when markets begin to fail and you don't have the value in your assets to invest, you simply can't invest. That led to a number of hotels and guest houses being forced to stay in the industry long after the consumer had moved on to better product. When the policy was ended, sir, finally we saw, although we saw a lot of the older stock leave the industry and in most instances create much needed housing, sir, we also saw considerable hundreds of millions of pounds of new investment in hotels, refurbishment of hotels, expansions to hotels, extensions, and of course brand new hotels, and there is still an appetite, both in the island and off island, for sites to build new hotels. And I very much hope that Ports of Jersey and the States of Jersey Development Company will embrace that and allow some of their land to be put for that purpose, so modern hotel stock can be created. We've seen a number of applications from Premier Inn to the Apart Hotel being proposed for Broad Street, which are most welcome. I ask members also to take, I mean, tourism essentially could be classed as a numbers game outside of the thread of tourism which runs through just about everything we do over here, the benefits tourism brings, not least a very strong air and ceilings, which incidentally we've seen increase significantly with the current reduced number of beds. But it's not the reduced number of beds we need to focus on. It's the availability of the available bed nights that are available. And currently we have somewhere in the region of 3.5 million bed nights available. And I'm not sure of the exact percentage of those we're filling, but when we had 30,000 beds, a lot of those beds closed for the winter. So whilst we might have utilised those beds during the summer months, the majority of them were laying empty for the winter in either closed hotels or hotels that just weren't able to fill them. Now that's not a very productive way to develop our industry. So what we're aiming to do is get a much better occupancy and yield from our 3.5 million bed nights. And we are beginning to see visitors to the island on a more year-round basis as we develop. I think people are generally taking more holidays than they used to. There are a lot more weekend breaks and short breaks. And when I was a boy, sir, not that long ago, we used to have one holiday a year as a family. But when we were bringing our children up, we were away 4 or 5 times a year. And so that's the trend we need to adapt to. And that's why we need to ensure we have the right stock, the right number of bed nights available, and work hard to fill those beds year-round. And the new tourism strategy will help to address that by, for example, developing a strong events program right through the winter months, aiming to utilise that capacity at the right time, sir. We're fortunate the hotels that remain in St Brelade's Bay are good quality 4-5-star hotels that offer really good facilities and are performing well. But of course, if we were to put restrictions on them, then I fear, as other members have said, we would dampen the appetite of the owners to invest, or might not dampen it. We might actually remove the ability for them to invest as their lenders reassess the value of their assets and decide they're not going to lend any more money, sir. And then we go right back to the beginning, which led, sir, to the removal of the prime site policy in the first place. So I hope that's helpful to them, sir. Clearly, I will be voting against the amendment, but I hope that's been useful. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Senator. If no, Deputy Ward.
Thank you, sir. It's an interesting debate when we talk about free market and the way the free market works, because we seem to have a real catch-22 situation here. You know, there's just faith in the free market and everything will work itself out, but in the end, there's a protection of the free marketeer asset at the end. And I go back to this amendment that says changes of visitor accommodation will not be supported if there is no market demand for the continued use of the premises for visitor accommodation. No market demand. And that's what we seem to be saying. That it's okay to not change anything as we are now, even though we are seeing evidence of hotels being developed for luxury apartments more and more. This sort of steady, slow but steady change to our coastline and to our island. But in the background, we could say, you know, it's not to do with market demand, but it is to do with market demand because you have to go to the bank and have an asset at the end. Well, if you can't get this to work and you've still got that asset, the bank will still owe you money because you'll have to send it in the end because there is, as the amendment says, no market demand for the continued use of the premises for visitor accommodation. And it's interesting to hear the Assistant Chief Minister, the Minister of Economic Development, I think is the title, talk about the tourism strategy Because again, we have a contradiction. We have a tourism strategy that is putting lots of money into attracting tourists. And I believe that Visit Jersey has a target of a million visitors to the island. But at the same time, we're saying that we can't guarantee some sort of demand for these hotels and protect these hotels. And we've got to let them be able to be sold up whenever we want that's okay. Now, we can't have both. You can't have your cake and eat it in this circumstance. You can't try and attract 1 million visitors a year and not have a hotel accommodation. This is a small island. And I think this is the myth of this free market. Unfortunately, we're not in a huge, huge country where there's so much choice. There isn't. And there has to be some protection. I looked on the website for Visit Jersey and looked at the accommodation at St Brelade's Bay. I think I may have closed the page, unfortunately, sir. And there were about 6 places came up to stay. 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 on the Visit Jersey site. So it's not as if there's a huge wealth of opportunity there to stay. And if 1 or 2 of those hotels is sold up, or one of the larger ones, it's a significant decrease in visitor accommodation in that area. And very rapidly that can change. And I really, that is a different reality, I think, from the one we're seeing. And I suppose that what members have to decide is whether they think that in this small area, specifically St Brelade's Bay, we want to say that there needs to be a greater reason for selling up these hotels for luxury accommodation, because that's what it will be, or whether we want to say with this amendment, actually, we need to have some protection in there to protect that part of the tourism industry for this island. Because if we don't do that, it will be lost, and it will go, and it will become a more exclusive bay for a few individuals who can own this. And actually, I have a slight concern over Premier Inn and the Parter hotels. I have nothing when we're staying with them. I've stayed with them many times. They're reasonable and et cetera, et cetera. But actually, they are large conglomerates from outside the island who are coming to the island and make an investment. And they're not going to make that investment as a charity to the island. They're going to make that investment because they can see in the long term they can make a lot of money out of this island and they can come and go as they please. And at a point where they decide, actually, it's not viable for us as much anymore, we're off and we'll sell up our Premier Inn accommodation as luxury accommodation in the centre of town or wherever, and they'll be gone. And there will be no loyalty to this island. So, sir, I think we have to try and unpick this free market argument at the moment, because you can't have it both ways. And I think that this amendment I can support, because it does say there is that backup of no market demand. And I think the fear-mongering regards banks saying, oh, we're suddenly going to withdraw all investment, doesn't make sense. Because this industry, this visitor industry, which we do need to support, otherwise we will lose it, needs some sort of protection. And I don't see why we're spending so much money on Visit Jersey if at this one and the same time we were going to allow hotels in pristine area of the island at a whim to be sold off for luxury accommodation, and for those who want to bring wealth to the island and want to have their own personal playground. I just think it's a contradiction, and I don't see how that's going to work. It's up to members to make their own decision on that one, but I think we need to consider that part as part of this debate. But it's been a very interesting debate, I will say so. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy. If no other members wishes to speak, I call upon the... Deputy Gardner.
Thank you, sir. Yeah, it's the last moment that I decided to speak. Follow the previous speaker when he mentioned 6-7 hotels at St Brelade's Bay. When I moved to Jersey, it happened. Lots of friends of mine and families approach and say, wow, it's a new place. What do you have? You have place to stay on the beach and to have places just to have a nice, relaxing holiday. And the only place that came to my mind, if they don't want to stay in town, which sounds brilliant, and I don't have any problem with Premier Inns and other hotels, chains coming to town. I think they're bringing great product to town. But St Brelade's Bay was the only place where people can have this type of holiday. 6, 7 premises there, it's even not enough. If we would like to develop ourselves as a destination for which holiday type, we have to make sure that none of these hotels will disappear. The moment it's disappear, you cannot build another place on the first line to sit at the terrace, to have a glass of wine, to enjoy our seafood, and to see children running on the beach. I understand it's complicated, and I understand the situation in the industry is changing. And maybe it's overprotection, but I would rather to be at this place overprotected for the 6, 7 properties for visitor accommodations on St. Brulard's Bay than to be sorry later. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Southern.
Yes, sir. And just briefly, because we've had a fair old whack at this particular amendment, I think what we're witnessing is the privatisation of the seafront. That's what's happening. It's becoming accessible only to a few. Best sites, best places, limited access. Instead of the hotel or the cafe, it's become private accommodation. And increasingly, that's what's happening to our island. We're selling it, all the best sites off to the private sector. I think it's something that we should, as responsible for the island economy, should be doing something.
Thank you, Deputy. If any other members wish to speak, then I call upon the Connétable to reply.
Sir?
Oh, forgive me. Oh, yes, Connétable St. John.
Thank you, sir. It's an interesting debate. We hear about the requirement to list all sorts of buildings around the island. Many of them we were talking about yesterday, protecting windows. Some of these businesses don't give any value to the economy, and yet here we have a small number of properties which provide a great opportunity for our visitor economy. And I support the Constable's efforts to try and offer them some more protection. The businesses, the banks are businesses just like the hotels. I disagree with Deputy Guida's comments that if you can't make money out of a hotel, you're a useless business person. There can be lots of contributing factors. And I really think that we should be offering this special area of Jersey some more protection than we currently do. And I would urge members to actually support the Constable's amendment. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Connétable. Deputy Martin.
Thank you, sir. I'll try and be brief, because I think we've heard some excellent speeches, and I'd like to cite Deputy Morales and the Minister for Economic Development and the Constable of St Clement. But I actually spoke because I just can't let the likes of Deputy Higgins, Deputy Southern there, telling us if we don't support this, we literally have no interest in tourism. We don't have any interest in St Brulard's Bay. It literally, we're trying to hold back the tide. Deputy Waldred out, if they're not economically viable or not making any money, or paraphrasing I am, sir, then obviously they can be sold. Well, how do you do that, sir? You've absolutely done everything you can in your hotel or your business, so you shut for a year. The next year, of course, you can prove there was nobody interested in coming because you shut. And for members who haven't been around long enough, we tried this policy between 2000 and 2005. Any hotel that had a sea view weren't allowed to be sold. They all shut. Deputy Tadier talks about, and I loved it, when it was a holiday camp, Plymouth, Pontins on the best view that Pontins ever had. And when they shut, because, as everyone else has pointed out, we went into battle, if you like, with the likes of the Costa del anywhere that you could fly to and have so cheaply, and our drinks, etc., was going up. It's unrecognisable, the island today, but we can't tell businesses that you can't sell. because the first thing they're going to do is going to look at their books today and say, oh, and especially we're trying to pick off one place. We've lost some beautiful, and the Mayfair. I mean, you know, places like that where they used to have brilliant nightlife every day, every night of the week, not for just the tourism. I've been there many a time, locals. I've had families staying. We're losing these places. And it's not to the highest bidder. It's because we are competing with so many other places. And I had to speak, sir, because I'm not being told I don't support tourism. I'm selling to, you know, it's only interested in bringing in 21Es and selling them these places. No, sir. I want tourism for, look, some of the bays in the hotels in St Bernard's Bay do the most fantastic deals for locals. Or on the shoulder mounts. I don't want that to go for locals. I've seen it over the last 35, 40 years that I've been here. Funny, so I was at a funeral last week, and it was for a publican who was here in the late 70s, early 80s. And a lot of people came over and hadn't been back to the island, especially in St Helier, for over 30 years, and they couldn't believe how it's changed. And where was that pub they used to work in? Where was that hotel they used to stay? And it was depressing, sir. But to pass this today, you just, I think, I go back, and it was many hours ago now, it feels like, Senator Gorse made some very pertinent remarks on what businesses you can do to business and you can't do to business. And it was followed up by Deputy Morrell, who made an absolute brilliant speech. And I thought, well, should I add my 2 pence, sir? But I had to, because I'm not supporting tourism, but I can't support the constable and maybe put a nail in the coffin of another hotel. Maybe not this year, sir, but possibly next year, because they just can't survive and they will go out of business. And this way, we are actually helping them along, because they can't even invest, because the banks are now seeing their investment as a bit dodgy. So I'll leave it there, sir, but I see the Chief Minister wants to come in. We nearly thought we were at the end of this debate, but there you go. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Senator Le Fondre.
Yes, yes, I apologise to Deputy Martin, because I thought after a couple of the speeches I'd come in, and then she obviously beat me to it. I think for me, I absolutely agree with the sentiment of what the Conotard, what Senator Ferguson are trying to achieve, but like a number of other speakers, this is really not the right way to do it. I know there are 2 flaws. One is why just St Brillard's Bay versus why not St Albans, for example, as in the village rather than the bay, but or both actually. So number one, I think there's a flaw in that approach. And number 2, actually, which I think Deputy Morrell was probably the most eloquent on the subject, but basically, if we threaten essentially the security of any lending, we will really be causing massive problems within the industry. I absolutely, so for all those reasons, unfortunately, I won't be supporting this amendment either, sir. I do absolutely agree with the sentiment being proposed. I will absolutely state the point that, in my view, if we lost some of those key hotels, whether in St Bernard's Bay or other bays or around the island, that would be a catastrophe, in my view, from the point of view of the tourism economy, particularly those where they have done a lot of investment over the last few years, the last many years, to bring the product up to what is generating a very good hospitality offer in the 21st century. And actually, sir, that has been in the forefront of our minds as well, actually on CAM, as we've come through the pandemic, about how do we support those businesses to try and make sure that they survived what has been a horrendous time. I think we used to say probably up to about 5 winters now, and hopefully we're now coming out at the other side, and hopefully they can now recover. But so let's make no accusations that we don't support the industry. I do agree in certain circumstances, sir, slightly reminiscing. I haven't seen a photograph of you though, sir, in the photographs I've been looking at, but I was looking at some photographs from the 80s and the 90s very, very recently online, which were talking about the sense of fun, sir, that we used to have. And I think, sir, the industry life has moved on, but I think that people who do look back at the heydays of the 80s and 90s and the sense of fun that we had, perhaps that's something else for the hospitality industry, sir. But other than that, and trying to put the clock back to those very sunny days and Bergerac, etc., and when Deputy Lewis was helping out with the filming of the car and all the rest of it, I think that the best thing we can do to support the industry is not support this amendment, sir. And on that basis, sir, because for two reasons: A, why just St Bernard's Bay, and B, it will seriously threaten the security, sir, of the hotels that it's trying to save. Thanks.
Thank you. If no other members to speak, I call upon the Connotab to reply. Connotab.
Thank you, sir. And I thank all members who've contributed towards the debate. And I respect the views of the Council of St Clement as having had first-hand experience, which I think is useful to understand. So I too, going back years, had close family connections with a large town hotel, albeit seasonal hotel. Staff were let go at the end of the season and taken on again in the spring. Ballrooms, dancing, having fun and all that sort of thing. But the owners got to the stage in life where they wished to retire, and the choice was, and it was put on the market at a valued price, and the first to come along were developers. And so now, sir, on that particular site, there are apartments. And of course, it's very easy to do, and that is the natural process, I suppose. When an owner wishes to pull out, you're going to take the best offer. And I think without any intervention, which I'm suggesting to a degree here, that will continue to occur. I suppose one could say, sir, that the present situation whereby the hotel stock, hotel beds in the island is so much diminished is possibly, apart from the effects of competition from other resorts and indeed of late various global circumstances, it's a result of us probably not doing enough earlier. And Visit Jersey recognises St Bernard's Bay as a key tourist resort, and perhaps if you can't survive with a hotel business in the Bay, you're not really destined to survive in business at all. And how much should we be protecting the smaller business person to survive when they probably wouldn't survive in the real world? So a couple of points I'd just like to pick up out of members' contributions, and one was Deputy Ward's comment about no market demand, and that's often used as an excuse that really needs to be distilled down into detail and evaluated, because you can use market demand if you actually haven't put the effort yourself into the marketing. Has it been as a result of global circumstances or other in your particular market? Without knowing that detail, it's too much of a broad comment, and I think he rightly says it needs to be taken with care, because very often the lack of market demand, I think, in the hotel business, and those in it will confirm, is because people aren't coming to your establishment because you haven't invested. And it's quite easy not to invest. It's easy actually to pull too much out of a business and not put the money into, as in the past, en-suite facilities, even updating the place to what people want these days. And I don't dispute the fact that hotel business has moved on. As I mentioned earlier, we've moved on from the full board offer. We have now the situation where cafes and restaurants surrounding hotels have picked up that the distilling down from the hotel into the economy throughout. And it's all much appreciated. And I think the island is very well equipped to do that in terms of boutique hotels mentioned by others. Yes, that's the appetite for the market today. We can support it with the cafes and restaurants round and about, and I think we do that very well. So what are Visit Jersey doing to enhance that? What are they doing to enhance the that particular offering in St Bernard's Bay. I'm sure the hotels down there would appreciate any help that they could be given. So with regard to borrowing, yes, I'm in business. I know what the process of having to borrow from banks or financial institutions. There are lots of methods of doing this. I suspect that borrowing will be, in order to perhaps secure finance to expand a hotel. That could be the ideal solution, and we would like to see that. But borrowing to buy a new hotel is probably going to be difficult. So we need to encourage those that are still there. It was mentioned, sir, that hotels may get converted into private accommodation. And could they be converted back? I suspect so. That would never happen. We look at St Bernard's Bay once again, and down at the western end, we used to have the hotel which was sold, converted into private residences, Le Creux Hotel. That went years ago. We've seen La Valleuse Hotel go to, once again, apartments. And in each case, sir, I can tell you it's because the owners wanted to retire, and there wasn't really an option for them to move their premises into further accommodation. The question I ask is, how can we deal with this? If this, as some suggest, is the wrong proposition, I accept that, but let's think of how we can actually stop this, what seems an internal decline in hotel bed provision. And I look to the Economic Development Minister to do that. It's his task to do that. It's Visit Jersey's task to do that. We can't let this go unnoticed. And if this proposition or amendment does nothing, sir, I would like it to make a mark with the planning department and say, come on, we need to be aware that our hotel stock is diminishing. We mustn't allow that to happen. So I don't think there's any advantage in me continuing any further with regard to the detail. You've heard enough of me, but I would thank members for speaking once again and ask for the appel. Thank you.
The appel has been called for. Members are invited to return to their seats. Those joining the meeting by the Teams link are asked to cast their votes in the chat channel, and I invite the greffier to open the voting for members in the chamber. All members have the opportunity of casting their votes. Then I ask the greffier to close the voting. I can announce that the amendment has been rejected, 14 votes pour and 27 votes contra, with a request that both be read out.
Those voting pour in the chamber: Senator Mezek, the Connétables of St Lawrence, St Brelard and St Martin, Deputy Southern, Deputy Ward and Deputy Gardner. And in the chat, Deputy Higgins, the Connétable of St John, Deputy of Grouville, Deputy Pamplin, the Deputy of St John, the Connétable of St Saviour, Deputy Tadier, and then those voting contre in the chamber, Senator Farnham and Moore, the Connétable of St Helier, Grouville, St Peter, St Mary, St Juan and St Clement, Deputy Lewis Pinel, St Juan, Doublé, St Mary, Young, Morel, Guida, Lehegra and Ayer, and those voting contre in the chat. Senator Lafondre, Senator Gorst, Senator Pallett, Deputy Martin, Deputy Ash, Deputy Pershard, Deputy Truscott, the Deputy of St Peter, Deputy of Trinity, and that's it.
Thank you. We now move to the 19th Amendment lodged by Senator Pallett, and I note from the chat that Senator Ferguson has withdrawn her amendment to this amendment. I ask the greffier to read the 19th Amendment.
After the words "the Draft Island Plan 2022 to 25, insert the words "except that within Proposal 17, St Brellard's Bay Improvement Plan," after the words "Improvement Plan for St Brellard's Bay," there should be inserted the words "by December 2023.
Senator Pallett.
Thank you, sir. Hopefully, this will finally move us away, after this proposition, away from St Brellard's, which I think we'll all agree is high time, but not before, hopefully, we can agree this proposition. This proposition has been agreed by the Minister, so I'm hoping there shouldn't need to be a great deal of debate on this. And I also want to thank Senator Ferguson for withdrawing her amendment, which did limit the amount of time that would have been available to actually what I believe to be an unreasonable amount of time to try to provide an improvement plan. As I say, I'm going to hope we all agree that there is a need for a St Brellard's Bay improvement plan. It's been long needed. It's something that we've had to wait a considerable amount of time for, to some degree, and I want to hold my hand up now and say, to some degree, I'm culpable. I was Assistant Minister in the Planning and Environment Department between 2014 and 18, and unfortunately other priorities took precedent at that time, and I can only apologise for that. But there is a chance, I think, today to put that right and finally get the work underway within a reasonable time frame. I think from what we've heard over the last few days, there is a need for a holistic St Brellard's Bay improvement plan. There was almost a risk that we were trying to do that by stealth. And for me, anything that we bring forward needs to be done through consultation. And I think the Minister's been clear that in the wording of the Dry Bridge and Island Plan, the improvement plan should be developed by engaging the local community, and that should be all the local community, be it business, residents, the parish or other interested key stakeholders. Consultation is absolutely vital, and it's been mentioned today within other propositions. There have been, as we all know, for some time now, tensions in the Bay around development of various sites. They're all well known. I'm not going to go into them in any great detail. Some of which, from a design point of view, have been disappointing. Others, I think, less so. But nevertheless, there does need to be, I think, a better understanding of what is desired in the Bay, not just by residents and Brellards, but I think people or islanders generally into what is our prime tourist destination. I just want to just very briefly on one site. The Wayside site has been mentioned a few times in the last few days, and more as a residential development. I think it's too easy to forget that there is a commercial element going back into that site, and by the way of a restaurant and a shop. So in terms of the economy in the Bay, that hasn't been lost. Now, whether you agree with the design of it and the style of it is, I suppose, is subjective. But at the end of the day, it is a mixed site. Yes, there is residential on it, and it, to some degree, or to some people, not the type of residential that some may really desire. But nevertheless, it isn't just a residential site. One of the things that my hobby, and I think most people know what my hobby is, and that's swimming in the sea. One of the things that's given to me over a period of time is, and people have talked about perspective from the sea, is a perspective of the island from the sea. Now, don't get me wrong, I don't when I go out swimming, I don't spend a lot of my time looking around at the island, but there are times when I do stop, or I'm talking to friends I'm swimming with, and look around and look at some of the bays that we swim in. And it does give you a different perspective on the island. Sometimes that disappoints me when I see some of the things that have gone on around the island, and others that make me extremely proud of the fact that we've got an extremely diverse coastline, and one that deserves protecting for the long term. There has been some criticism around why we're concentrating in St Brelard so much. I think St Brelard is an important parish, not just in terms of its diversity, but in terms of what it offers economically, from a tourism perspective, and many other perspectives as well. And I know it's been said that St Brelard's Bay is a jewel in the crown, but for me, the jewel in the crown is the island, is the island's coastline. And it needs to be protected, not just in St Brelard's Bay, but further afield. I shouldn't say it as somebody else in St Brelard's, but probably my favourite bay to swim in is St Catherine's. And when I look around at St Catherine's and Goree, it is a unique, absolutely spellbinding, beautiful part of the island, and something that we don't want to see destroyed in any way, shape or form. And maybe there should have been more emphasis within this draft Bridging Island plan around ensuring that St Catherine's and Goree has more protection. What disappoints me, and I'm only going to go slight off track just for a second, is that when you drive around to Goree, there have been some absolute monstrosities built around Montorgueil Castle, in fact in plain sight of Montorgueil Castle. Which I think most of us would agree doesn't particularly improve the view or the environment. But it's gone on, it's been allowed. But I think we do need to keep a closer eye on some of our beauty spots, such as Goree, so that they don't get damaged in the way that they, in my opinion, have been to some degree. I just want to comment very slightly, again, just going slightly off track around the shoreline zone yesterday, and I know I didn't vote for that, but the reason I didn't vote for that yesterday was I felt it was blighting some properties within that shoreline zone, and for me it was a blunt tool to deal with the shoreline zone, and I just couldn't agree with that. But I just wanted to be clear about why I'd done that. But getting back to this particular proposition, it is important that we do have a holistic, long-term vision for St Brelard's Bay. There is an opportunity, I think, to do that in what I believe is a reasonable time frame. That's to December 2023. It does give the new minister ample opportunity to put the wheels in motion and ensure that the consultation that's required can take place. I thank Senator Ferguson in some ways in her amendment, because she's as frustrated as I am that it's not been done up to now. But I think I'm hoping that we can all agree that it is time to move on, get this work done, and give an opportunity for the next Assembly. And islanders more generally to comment on what they want for St Brelade's Bay in future years. And that's, I think I'll leave it there.
Thank you, Senator. Is the amendment seconded? Thank you. Does anyone wish to speak on the amendment? Minister.
Just, I think, to say I accept the amendment. It's an improvement. It puts a timescale on this work. I think for a long time it is true that there's been talk of having a plan for St Brelade's Bay. I think that is my advice to whoever is Minister in the new Assembly to progress that now. We've got a date, is to make sure you get the resources and bring that forward to the States so to give the effect to real teeth and not be in the position that's happened before where a lot of work has been done, the community has put a lot of effort into it and the whole thing has fallen flat. That's the past record. I take no responsibility for that. All of that predates me, but that should, but it's no question happen again. A senator makes lots of other points that are probably off-piece, but I would say I'd be very hopeful that the other parts of the plan do exactly what he seeks, protection for the special coasts and so on. We had that debate the other day, so those measures are all in there. So I hope that, but I support this and I accept this amendment, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Constable St Brelade.
Thank you, sir, and just stand to give support to the proposition, but just with actually bolster what the Minister just said, if a report comes out, let's take note of what it says and do what it says and not ignore it as we've done in the past. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Conatap. If no other member wishes to speak, I call upon the Senator to reply. Senator Pallett.
Thank you, sir. Just very briefly, I just want to thank the Minister for his comments and his supportive comments, and again, thank my constable in St Brelade's again for his positive comments, and I'm sure he will, like many others, want to see this improvement plan developed as soon as possible and with the greatest possible consultation. And with that, sir, could I ask for the appel?
The appel has been called for. Members are invited to return to their seats. Those joining the meeting with the Teams link may cast their votes in the chat channel, and I invite the grevio to open the voting for members in the chamber.
I don't think the vote's working, sorry. I'm going to reset it.
My voting light has disappeared, so I'm not sure if the vote's...
Yes, the votes in the chamber has malfunctioned.
No. I'm going to shut it down and set it up again.
If members are agreeable, we could proceed on a standing vote in relation to this, because so far everyone's voted in favour. Those in favour, please show. Thank you very much. Those against? Thank you. The amendment is adopted on a standing vote. Deputy Gardner, do you have a proposition to make now, or not, in relation to a matter you want to take out of turn? Perhaps I'm wrong about that.
I thought about after item 32, but I'm happy to make a proposition.
Oh, no, we can wait until later on. It's a matter for you.
I'll do it now, so the members will be aware. I have amendment number 7 that listed as 53. It's about parish connection, that any parish development will be allocation of 50% to the parish links and 50% to anywhere else on the island. Minister has accepted my amendment, but when the proposition was read out, it was read out without this amendment. I would like to debate if we are, first of all, if Minister accepted the amendment, if members are happy to accept the amendments, we can just accept and go through. If the members would like to have a debate on this amendment, I would request to have a debate after item 32 before we debate in any fields, because it is important for all parties to know where we are standing to bring it forward. So, thank you, sir.
After 32,
after Minister's amendment about the housing, before we debate any fields.
do you mean
So the first question, would we like to have a full debate as Minister accepted the amendment?
Do you mean you want it before Amendment 91? I can't see we're about to reach Amendment 32. Amendment
Apologies, sir. Item 32, after we debated the 90th amendment, to have a debate on Amendment 7, if members would like to have a full debate on it.
So you're inviting members to agree that this can be dealt with after the debate on the 90th Amendment?
Correct.
Yes. Is that proposition seconded?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Does any member wish to speak on this proposition?
Yes.
Sorry, sir, could we start with the debate on whether we want this to be debated at all, or whether to just accept it, since the Minister has accepted it?
Well, I'm reluctant to start a debate, not knowing if members want to speak on the subject, because members are entitled to debate any matter at any length. I can't tie the hands of members, and I think that the proposition is that...
Sir, the first, I would like to support the Deputy Gida request, because my first question to the State Assembly, to the members, would we like to have full debate? And the second question, if we would like to have, because Minister accepted it.
Yes, but I don't think we're going to have a debate on whether or not there's a debate. You can propose that the matter is debated now, if that's your wish, or you can propose that it's debated immediately before the 91st Amendment, after the 90th. It's a matter for you, but I don't think we can... I don't think it'd be in order for there to be a proposition that there is or isn't a debate. That's tying the hands of members who may wish to debate a proposition that's not been, the debate's not begun yet.
Okay, so thank you for clarifications, because there were 4 amendments that were missed at the beginning of the sittings yesterday, that they were accepted by the Minister. This is the reason that I raised the question.
That, and those matters need to be debated in the usual way. The debates may be very swift, but they do need to be debated. The proposition has been read.
No problem. I would like to debate it after 90th Amendment, please, if Assembly will agree.
After the 90th Amendment.
Which is item 32 on the agenda of Amendments 90.
Yes, so immediately before the 91st Amendment is debated. And that proposition has been seconded. Does anyone wish to speak on that proposition by Deputy Gardner?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Just to support it, sir, it's my fault probably because I was slow on the uptake at the start of the session, and although I'd indicated in the documents that I was prepared to accept this amendment and it could be taken as read, unfortunately that didn't happen, and therefore, as you say, I've assumed that we would need to debate it formally.
Yeah.
But very much, I think it is right that before we go on to discuss the various decisions on the zonings of various fields, that members do know whether or not the proposal of Deputy Gardner to how those homes could be allocated should be decided. I think that's a reasonable thing, sir, and I hope it helped me. So I support Deputy Gardner's amendment to change the order of the debate, to slot it in at between what is listed now, item 32 and item 35. So it would be slotted between those two, sir.
Yes. Does any other member wish to speak on this proposition?
Sir?
Yes, Deputy Morrell.
Yes, it's just not to speak with a view, but just to ask in her summing up if Deputy Gardner would mind explaining again why she wants this movement, because unfortunately I was concentrating on my own amendment and didn't hear anything she said. Thank you, sir.
Yes, thank you, Deputy. Does anyone wish to speak on this proposition?
So it's just some clarity. Forgive me. This has been. We are now going to. What is the number of Deputy Gardner's amendments that we're moving?
It's the 7th Amendment.
7th Amendment, and we're going to move that to before or after the 91st Amendment.
Immediately before the 91st Amendment.
In order that a decision about the allocation of possible homes can be made before we talk about whether the fields be accepted. Is
Yes.
that what? Sorry, so just to get that clarification.
That's correct. Does anyone wish to speak on this proposition? No? I call upon Deputy Garner to reply.
Thank you, sir. And they follow the request from Deputy Moreau.
Yes.
I haven't raised it earlier because I thought the amendment was accepted. So I didn't pay attention where it is on the order paper for debate. The moment that it was clear that we need to debate swiftly or not swiftly the amendment, I felt it's really important for all parties, for all views, to know if the rezoning of the fields will go only to the parish or it will be divided 50 between the parish and 50 remain of the island. Because my decisions personally about how I will vote on the rezoning fields will be very dependent how these fields will be used. And I think other members from either side as well. So it's important for me to debate it before we make decisions on the fields. Thank you, sir, and I make the proposition.
Thank you for that. I'll be grateful if you don't call for the appel, simply because although you're entitled to, of course, because we've currently got the difficulty we have. So members content to proceed on a standing vote. Those in favour, please show. Thank you. Any against? Thank you. So the Amendment 7 will be debated immediately before Amendment 91.
Sir, may I take the liberty, as I believe mine is the next amendment,
Yes, it is.
of proposing the adjournment. And it is simply that I don't want to do my introductory speech and then head off to lunch, if that's possible. Obviously, it's in the Assembly's hands. But I was wondering if that may be possible.
Well, it's a matter for the Assembly. The adjournment's been proposed.
Second.
Is it seconded?
Seconded.
Any member to speak on the adjournment?
Yes, sir.
Yes?
Just to support it, sir, and can I suggest it will give you officers a chance to fix the voting system?
Well, there is that. In that case, is anyone here to take the mace away? But the states stand adjourned until 2:15.